John. How you doing?
Well, look, thank you for having me, gentlemen. Much appreciated. And I do want to say at the outset that, for all the people that were heroic during the COVID hysteria, I will consider them till the day I die as brothers and sisters. And you two are right at the top of that list. So, one of my goals, I know we're talking about the most heated subject on the planet. One of my goals is to get through this and still be mates at the end of it.
Well, I've got to say, look, firstly, welcome. Thank you for coming on because it is, especially now in the current climate, it's super difficult to get politicians to come on and debate their bad ideas. Like I've seen, for instance, I told you, Babette has been spouting this stuff for a couple months now. I've been begging him to come on. He does not have the guts. He's refused every time. He's hiding. So Babette, if you're watching this, which I know you are because you want to see what a real man looks like, that's a politician that, maybe has bad ideas, but at least he's willing to back them. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do that. And the fact that you're willing to do that shows me that it's probably not, I've known you for a while and I've always seen you as a politician that I thought had conviction, and it wasn't about internet clout or lack of substance. But Babette, if you're seeing this, unless you come and actually back your words here, like John is doing tonight, I think the rumors are true that you just want the clout before you end your reign in 2.5 years. How long have you got left, John?
Well, hopefully 5.5. Well, I got 5.5. Hopefully, I'll get re-elected. So we'll see how that goes.
You're still going for that because I know Babette isn't.
Yeah, well, I hope to get re-elected. Yes.
Okay, so we'll see at the end of this. Well, at the end of this conversation, the next election, I'll probably, just for showing up, I'll put you second last at this point, beyond, just above the trumpet of wankers.
Oh
You've
my
earned that.
God.
Why don't we get into the debate, gentlemen? I think
No,
people
no,
are
no, no.
tuning in. They want to hear the debate.
We had to start with kicking Babette's weakness. But the debate, it all started with your tweet. Do we want to bring the tweet up or should I just read it?
No, I'll bring it up. I can bring it up on
So
the
the
screen.
tweet itself confused, I guess, a lot of supporters of yours, people like me who supported you for a long time, who considered you, I guess, a libertarian from the kind of center conservative, center right, somebody that was approaching libertarianism from a common sense perspective. And I think Israel's always been a great litmus test for how people, where people are in when it comes to these, just to their political worldview. I've always personally looked at that as a litmus test, and you've always passed that test with flying colors. But do you want to bring that up? I can't really. I'll read it here. Do you want to bring it up a bit bigger? Can people see that?
Yeah, people can see it. It's pretty big.
All right. So you wrote here, I was proud to march the COVID lockdowns against COVID lockdowns. Tomorrow, I'll be proud to march against what can only be described as a genocide. So I think the first thing to start here is, what are you defining genocide as, that you reach a conclusion that it's only can be described as that?
Okay, so in World War II, in the final days of World War II, in the Pacific Theatre, the Americans killed about 2 million Japanese civilians. Now, that is not classified as a genocide because that was a war. Now, we're not going to debate tonight whether that was moral or not. But after the war was finished, after the war, the Americans rebuilt Japan with love. And Japan's a very successful, happy, liberal democracy since. So what's happening now is the definition of genocide is an attempt to eradicate a people and not kill them all, but just have their identity, their cultural identity, expunged off the planet. Now, in Israeli politics, since the 1920s, since the Zionist settlers started coming in a fairly big way, it's been roughly divided between two groups: moderate Zionists and radical Zionists. And the leadership has swung now. They're back and forth, but it's the moderate Zionists have, on at least a dozen occasions, done their very best to have a peace deal.
Through it. I want to work through it. Forget going back in history. I just want to understand the definition of genocide that you're saying it can only be described as that. What's the definition?
about 9 hours ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced to the world that the goal now is the full occupation of Gaza. They basically want to put yes, it is. Yes, they want to push them out, kill a lot of them. A lot have been killed already. It's about 100 to 1 compared to what happened at the atrocity on October the 7th.
You can argue
they're trying to push them out, make life so undifficult. They've blown up the infrastructure. They're just hoping that they go away. President Trump said, "Oh, well, we'll relocate them," and Netanyahu said, "Oh, that sounds good." So, but he's openly said it today. Avi, I reckon I love.
Hold on. Let's just work it one thing at a time. So your definition of Gaza is the occupation of Gaza. Your definition of genocide is the occupation of Gaza.
Well, it's the occupation. It's smashing up all the infrastructure, and it's just trying to basically get them to move. There was talk about moving them to the Sinai today. So they just basically want them out of there. But this is not all Israelis. This is not all Zionists. There's a very big peace movement in Israel.
Let's not cast judgment on any group or divider. I want to get clear on the definitions here, because I think there's a problem in the definition to begin with. The definition of genocide from a legal perspective is the intentional destruction of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. What you're describing, if it comes true, so the idea of pushing them out, while it may be a war crime, let's say, is maybe ethnic cleansing. It's not genocide. Occupying is not genocide. These words have specific meanings, and I think it's important that we don't do what the left does and just appropriate the meanings. So according to the legal definition, do you still stand by genocide?
You know, I saw Professor John Mearsheimer speak in Sydney about 6 months into this conflict, and he said that the biggest enemy that the radical Zionists have got is TikTok. He said people are seeing unbelievable images coming through, and this is why, Avi, I reckon I'm a bigger supporter of Israel than you. Because what's happening is all around the world, support for Israel is collapsing.
Okay.
Israel. So in Australia, it's down to 14% of Australians now support what Netanyahu's doing. So let's not quibble over the definition of words. Let's talk about some.
That's what people are upset about. People are upset about you using the specific word to begin with. That was a tweet that sparked the outrage. So I think the definition of genocide matters. Now, what you've described is not a genocide. It is maybe ethnic cleansing if it pans out the way you're saying. It's either occupation or ethnic cleansing. It's not genocide, and neither have happened. So
both are pretty bad, aren't they?
How can you tweet that it can be described nothing other than only be described as genocide when neither of what you've even described, so the occupation and or the ethnic cleansing hasn't even happened, but the genocide definitely hasn't happened?
There's only if we boil it down, there's only two outcomes here. We either have a two-state solution or we have ethnic cleansing. Now, who are the two groups that want the ethnic cleansing?
Okay.
Hamas and the radical Zionists.
Okay, so we agree there's no genocide until now. Can we agree on that? It hasn't happened. There's not a genocide yet.
No, it looks like a genocide to me. The social media is.
So it looks like a genocide because the
international Court of Criminal Justice has called it a genocide. Okay, why do we want to quibble? Why do we want to quibble about words?
But facts matter, words matter, and they didn't. Are you talking about the ICJ ruling?
The ICJ.
That there's a plausible case to be made in court to argue that it's possible that there's a genocide. They have not.
And how long ago was that? How long? I mean, things keep escalating and getting worse.
They have not ruled a genocide. A genocide, listen, at what point do you think this genocide started? At what point? Because a lot of the people you marched with when it comes to the Marxists and the Islamists that marched on the Sydney Harbour, they would say that the genocide started, 50 years ago. When do you think or 75 years ago, if you ask them, when do you think the genocide started?
Well, no, I would say it's something that has been ramping up, and this is why, look, October the 7th was an attempt of genocide, okay, by Hamas, okay, okay. Now, then there was initially unbelievable public support all around the world for Israel at the time.
When did the genocide start? When did the genocide that you say that you can only describe it as, when did it start? I know that there was great support right after October 7th. I don't need to hear that. I'm asking
Yeah.
specific questions around what you've written and what you've said. When did the genocide start?
Look, there was clearly an attempt very, very early on that the radical Zionist faction in Israeli politics said, this is an opportunity, let's make the most of it. Now, they have look, President Trump, who I've normally been a supporter of, he seems to have given them unconditional support to just go and get the job done. You know, Avi, and I know, that there has been a term amongst radical Zionists to go out and called mowing the lawn. What does mowing the lawn mean, Avi?
Go tell me.
You know what it means, and I'll tell you. And it's what
It
radical Zionists say, that every now and again we've got to go out there and mow the lawn. We've got to wipe out a whole ton of Palestinians just to keep them under control.
Complete nonsense. What you're saying.
Well, it's all
the way it's
no one's
the way it's
disputing
framed
that.
is complete nonsense. It's referring to every time that there's over the last since 2005, since Israel left Gaza, when Hamas decides to start firing a heap of rockets, that they've got to cut the problems that were coming in at them, deal with it, and quash the problem. It's not talking about killing a heap of Palestinians. And the idea that so from your answer, you're telling me that the genocide started before October 7th.
I wouldn't have classified. I wouldn't have classified it.
So you're saying since October 7th, it's been a genocide?
Look, I think it's been ramping up over the sort of last 4 or 5 months. That's when the social media feed of people all around the world are seeing absolutely horrific images, and this is why countries like Canada and France and Ireland and half of Europe are being very critical.
That's not why countries like that. And you know full well the reason why some of these countries are jumping on the bandwagon has more to do with their either internal politics within Australia, Canada, the UK, and also to undermine Trump. They all don't like Trump, but none of them have the balls.
No, look, it's not that. It's not that. It's people are sick.
Let me ask you,
people are horrified of inhumane.
How many people have been killed in total in Gaza, terrorists and civilians together?
Well, look, it's hard to know, but I think the consensus is around 70,000. But I mean, there's a lot more. That's people who've directly killed. But then there's a lot of people who can't get to hospitals now because there is no hospital. There's a lot of secondary effects which we're not aware of. There's been a massive decline in birth rates. So there's been. There's 70,000.
I think Hamas's own numbers is 60,000 at the moment. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 70,000.
Same ballpark.
How many bombs has the Israeli Air Force, how many bombs have they dropped on Gaza? Do you know?
I don't know, but I mean, I see images of Gaza, and I see, as far as the eye can see,
you sound
rubble.
You sound like a lefty. I get it. You've seen shocking images. I'm not downplaying the horrific situation in Gaza.
Yeah. Well,
just put your emotions aside for a second. Let's talk rational, because you're a rational guy.
Debate. This was a debate, Avi. Okay. So far it's been an interrogation. So I would like to ask you a question. I'd like to put a counterfactual to you. After October the 7th, when there was none of this rolling your eyes.
No. I'll let you. I want you to have an open mind. I'll let you do that. Let me finish the point here, right? So, how many bombs? You don't know how many bombs were dropped. I'll tell you. There's about 70 to 100,000 bombs is what they're estimating that has been dropped. Exactly, but there's more bombs have been dropped on Gaza than total people killed. So, if Israel was committing a genocide, which by the definition, not your weird, not real definition, but by the actual definition, intent is the important part, to destruct of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. They're doing a pretty bloody bad job if they can't even kill one person that they're trying to eradicate for every bomb. Wouldn't you say?
Mate, look, it's unbelievable destruction. They have wrecked the joint. Okay?
That's not the argument. I agree with you. Gaza has been.
What's the end goal here? Do you support what Netanyahu has said today, that he wants full conquest and full occupation?
Personally,
what's the end goal?
Personally, not. But you know what? My family were from Gaza in 2005, dragged out of their homes for a deal that was promised of land for peace. What did they get since 2005? They got terror. They got terror,
Hamas.
war after war after war after war after war. My family gave up the biggest orange orchards, or whatever you call them, the farms in the country. They lost everything because they were given this. The country made a deal, land for peace, and now everybody's the entire country's angry about that deal because it turned out, unlike in Jordan, unlike in Egypt, no peace was to follow. So I personally don't think, I don't want no Israeli, except the radical settler, which are the minority in Israel, want to live in Gaza. They would love for Gaza to be a peaceful strip, the Singapore of the Palestinian Arab world. They would love that. But the truth is, most Israelis are living in a reality where they realize that that is not really possible, because we saw what happened after 20 years.
If it's not possible, so look, there's only two solutions. There's only two outcomes here. We either we have a two-state solution, or eventually one group's going to kick the other group out entirely. So I support the moderate Zionists who have consistently advocated for peace. Now, Avi, what do you? There are. I've got half a dozen quotes here from leading newspapers around the world, including Jewish newspapers, who've said emphatically that Prime Minister Netanyahu has had a long-term policy of pumping up Hamas. And why would he do that? Because he doesn't want a two-state solution. Let me finish. You've done all the talking. Let me finish.
Go.
And this is an ancient strategy of divide and conquer. He thought, okay, under no circumstances do I want a two-state solution. So what will I do? I'll pump up Hamas. I'll pump up the crazies, the real psychopaths. I'll pump them up. They can be the leaders. And then he can say, oh, well, I wanted a two-state solution, but I can't with Hamas. Yeah, and you can't with Hamas. But this is not disputed.
How did he pump him up? How did he pump him up?
You know, Avi. He has the Qataris have been. He's been facilitating, carrying over in suitcases hundreds of millions of dollars, giving it to Hamas, saying, boys, you stay in control. You stay in control. Okay. This is an undisputed fact. I know a lot of people are surprised to hear it. I say Google it.
No one's surprised to hear it, because it's a twisting of the reality, right? What happened in 2005? Hamas got voted in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
Correct? The Qataris giving aid to what was supposed to be the government in Gaza, Hamas, they had to do it through Israel. Now, if Israel didn't agree to pass on the money to the governing body of Gaza, what would the world be saying to them when they stopped those funds?
Well, if we'd been moving in the direction of peace, we could have had open borders, we could have had trade, people could have invested in Gaza.
Stop moving on to something else. This is directly about your claim. You claim...
It's not my claim. Okay, here's Prime Minister, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 2019. This is what he told...
Who spent time in jail and who has...
Netanyahu's strategy is to keep Hamas alive and kicking in order to weaken the Palestinian Authority. Okay. Here's The Guardian in March 2019. Netanyahu told his Likud colleagues, anyone who wants to...
Are you trusting The Guardian now? The Guardian's your source. Did you trust him during COVID? Come on,
look at the actions. It adds up. Hang on. Now, let me get the quote out, please, Avi. You've done 90% of the talking. This is what this is. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of the Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. There's endless quotes from people.
So what are you implying?
If you're disputing those quotes, look at the reality. What is the reality on the ground? It looks like that, doesn't it?
Israel is a robust democracy. You have people all across the political spectrum, unlike in Gaza, where everybody can say all sorts of crazy stuff for their own political purpose, including Ehud Barak, who certainly has his own agenda when it comes to undermining Bibi Netanyahu. But I'm not here to defend Bibi Netanyahu. One, I'm saying to you, firstly, yes, of course, Israel helped facilitate Qatar to give them their aid money to the government of Gaza. And yes, maybe you're right. Maybe the the Netanyahu government thought, great, at least there we have Hamas, there we have the PA in the West Bank. Fine, it suits our thing. But why are you taking away the agency from the Palestinian people in Gaza? Firstly, those that voted him in. Secondly, the Hamas themselves. Israel didn't make them commit the atrocities. Israel did not make them create their thing, which is a genocide. Their entire worldview genocidal. That Israel didn't make that. That was them. They did that all by themselves, and they went and committed October 7 all on their own, and many civilians, Gazan civilians, joined in. So you might be right that Bibi Netanyahu, and he has to answer to all of that. And guess what? Israel is like I said, a robust democracy where he's going to have to answer to all of that at the end of all of this. And I look forward to that. The point is, it's not that he funneled money to them. If he didn't facilitate it, the world would be arguing that Israel, how dare they stopped the money that wasn't even their money, aid money from a third party, from the Arab world to the governing body of Gaza. Now let's go to the protest.
Here's the Times of Israel in 2023. Since the onset of the war, Netanyahu's political opponents have repeatedly pointed out that he permitted the transfer of money suitcases from Qatar into Gaza.
Exactly.
These funds amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars over years were directed to the Hamas government. Now, let me put something.
I'm not arguing that fact. Why are you arguing that?
As well. Now, let me ask you something, okay? Jewish people in Russia, in the Russian Empire, their very bad pogroms began in 1881. Okay, there was a Russian Tsar, a very liberal Russian Tsar. He was assassinated, not by a Jewish person.
Because we've actually got to get onto the protest and the point that you were there. Like, okay, like how are we going on the Russian pogroms? Go on.
Well, this is where it began. Okay, now, about 2.8. Well, history's important.
Okay, do you want to argue the legitimacy of Israel? Like, I'm not going there.
No, I don't want to argue the legitimacy of Israel.
Is the Libertarian Party policy still anti-interventionist today? Are you the New South Wales branch? Are you anti-interventionist?
Of course, we want to be the Switzerland of the Pacific. Now, It's not a simple question. Let me finish it.
Yes or no?
We do not. No, it's
not. Are
you
anti-interventionist?
Well, we do not want the government to intervene. If we see extreme human rights abuses, we still don't want the government to intervene, but we are free to speak up, and we feel like we have a moral obligation to speak up and try to defend it.
Do you believe bombing Israel is considered an intervention that you would oppose?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you believe, what about sanctions?
No, I don't support sanctions, no.
But do you believe that's a form of intervention?
Yeah, because it's a form of intervention, that's right.
Okay.
We believe in goodwill, free trade and investment with everybody.
Hold on. So why the hell would you attend a protest that the stated aim, the description of the protest on the protest organization page itself says that it wants to sanction Israel now, and then the person you hung out with there made a video, shared their tweet a few times, posted their content, was a girl who many times has called for bombing Israel.
Okay, well, I don't know who you're talking about.
The Syrian girl. So
let me tell you, look, you weren't at the protest. I was at the protest. Okay, now let me tell you what my experience of the protest is.
Stated protest. Hold on. That's like a vegan activist. Listen, I'll give you an analogy.
I think the viewers might be interested in my experience at the protest, which I would like to tell them about.
We're getting to the people at the protest.
No. Avi, let me
answer the question. You're anti-interventionist. You went to a protest that the stated aim of the protest was intervention, and you hung out with somebody who talks often about direct intervention against Israel. That's like a vegan activist.
I spoke to probably 200 people. I have no idea who you're talking to.
They're sitting. You did a video with her. You reposted. Don't pretend like you don't know her. Don't pretend like you don't know her. You posted videos with her at the protest. You also reposted her post again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I know who you're talking about. Yes, Syrian girl.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said Syrian girl. So Syrian girl. So she's a full-on interventionist.
This is guilt by association.
No, this is guilt by participation. This is guilt by participation.
Are you judged by that?
By what?
When you were at the COVID protests, if someone gets up there and holds a sign saying the world is flat and
I'm glad you asked. If the protest organizers...
Is it guilt by association? We're avoiding...
I'm glad you asked. I'll answer you. At the COVID protests, if the stated aim of the COVID protest was to tear down the government, to revolt against, to cause a violent revolution, I would be participating in that. That's the difference between guilt by association to guilt of participation. Listen, that's like if a vegan activist lined up for a pig roast and then was caught out in the line, and somebody goes, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "I'm just here for the coleslaw." Nobody in their right mind is going.
I'm here to debate substance, not silly little gotcha tricks.
What gotcha trick? It's so the fact
Oh, no,
is
you're just trying. I think I've got a good message that your people need to hear. I think that I'm actually more pro the Jewish people than you are. Okay, because what's happening is, we've never had an anti-Semitism problem in this country since the First Fleet. It's never. Now there was one senator in 2019, Fraser Anning. I'm not saying he's an anti-Semite. He got accused of being an anti-Semite, and what vote did he get? About 0.5%. Okay, so there's never been an anti. Even in the 1930s, we had a fairly fascist group called the New Guard. They were not anti-Jewish. They were anti-communist. Now, why in the last 2 years are we hearing about all this anti-Semitism, which is happening? There is no doubt about that. Well, I think it's because Netanyahu has licked his lips at this opportunity, and he says, let's expand as much as we can. We've got a free rein to go. And they are damaging the Jewish people all around the world, and they're damaging the state of Israel. So my message is, let's bring back the moderate Zionists. They're the ones that have always initiated the peace talks. And as you pointed out earlier, the peace arrangement with Egypt has held. Thank God for that.
Jordan and UAE. But those are two.
The Abraham Accords. So my point is, we can have peace in this situation. When I was 10 years old, Avi, I'm reading about this situation on the TV, okay, and I asked my grandfather down in Victoria, I said, "What's going on here, Grandpa?" And he said, "Oh, look, it's been going on since I was a kid, okay? I don't want my grandkids in 30 years' time saying, what's this going on about? It's sucking the whole world into it." And we can end this, Avi. We don't have to talk about crap about the invitation.
Hold on. So you're blaming.
We don't have to talk about that. We have to talk about what is the solution. What is the solution?
You're blaming Israel for the anti-Semitism here. You're blaming Israel for people turning on local.
I'm not blaming Israel. I'm blaming the radical Zionists and the overreaction, and that's why opinion polls all around the world are crashing. And that's a big
listen,
problem.
I agree with you. Israel's losing the PR war, but thanks to people like you jumping on the bandwagon. But the PR war is not going to win the real war. It doesn't. Hold on.
Now see.
To Israel, it doesn't. To Israel, to the existence of Israel, it doesn't matter if they win the PR war. Great, you win the PR war, but you lose the actual battle. You're gone. It doesn't matter if Hamas got what they want to do. October 7 will repeat over and over and over again, and then there will be no Israel. So to Israel, it matters more to survive rather than whether John Ruddick supports them or not, and whether the polls tell them there's a lot of support. Okay.
I think they're very interested in Western public opinion. This is why radical Zionists in this country keep trying to restrict our free speech. Now, why is that, Avi? You're pro-free speech, aren't you?
Absolutely.
I've been here in the Parliament. Why do we keep getting lobbied? Why do we keep getting lobbied? Okay, by radical Zionist interests to restrict free speech. It's not happening, not just in Australia. It's happening all around the world. So they do care about public opinion. They do care about public opinion, and I care about the world's public opinion of Israel.
Okay, I've got some questions. Let's go through it because you're just deflecting off that. I'm happy. I'm going to get back to that. I promise you. That is part of my list.
Questions, Avi. It's a boring debate. Questions. Let's talk about substance.
Substance. Have you ever rallied for? You said you rallied for the children. Have you rallied for children in any other conflict before?
Well, I attended 2 or 3 rallies soon after October the 7th in favour of the Israelis. I was extremely distressed about the hostages. I still am. I'd like to tell you and your listeners something that happened to me. One of the first things I did when I got elected to Parliament, Avi, is I joined Parliamentary Friends of Israel, very proudly.
Amazing. You got cover, so you're not an anti-Semite. Good on you. I don't think you're an anti-Semite. I don't think you're an anti-Semite. I don't know what
it wasn't cover. I was very sincere.
Saying now you've got cover. Now you've got cover.
Hear me out. Now, I've got an important point to make. Now, let's have a test, Avi. Let's see if you can not interrupt me for 1 minute. Let's see. I don't think you can, but let's see if you can.
But try it.
So on October the 17th, 2023, there was a meeting of the Parliamentary Friends of Israel. And on that day, Elliot Abrahams happened to be visiting Sydney. Who's Elliot Abrahams? He's one of the most powerful neoconservatives in the US administration. Bush, Trump, Reagan, okay, and we're having a meeting there. He gives an address, and we're all like, shocked and horrified, about what had happened on October the 7th. I was the first person to ask a question. I said, what's happening with the hostages? Now, this is what this extremely senior national security figure in the United States for a generation, this is what he said to me when I asked about the hostages. First question from me. He laughed at me. He sort of dismissed me. He said, look, we've got a war to win now. He said, Israel never lets hostages direct our strategy. And I thought, well, that's a bit rough. Okay, but that is exactly what he said. Okay, so it's like they sort of thought, look, the hostages are taken. We can't do much about it. If we can get them out, good. But I mean, the focus is to win this war. And I'm thinking, now here's a counterfactual for you. Let's say that there has been a cycle of retaliation since the early 1920s. There's been atrocities on both sides. The worst atrocity of all time in this conflict was October the 7th. There's been nothing like it. It's the worst thing that's happened in the world since Rwanda in a single day. Now, let's imagine if at that point, Netanyahu said, look, it's got to end at some point. We've got to de-escalate at some point. So we've got 3,500 Palestinians in prison, many of them without charges. You give us back our hostages. We'll give you back our prisoners, 3,500 of them.
You mean the majority of them are charged? So give back terrorist waiting trial, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah. And if we did this, okay, and then we could have had, now look, and not retaliate. Now, the most famous Jew in history, the greatest human being in history, in my view, was a little guy called Jesus, and he taught us, de-escalate, don't retaliate. And that's what, now, this is, if we don't, at some point, someone has to say, let's not retaliate. Now, if Israel had said that, they'd be the most popular country in the world.
Would you apply this logic if it happened in Australia? Would you apply that if, what would be the same, what are we, 30 million, so 3 times. So if there was a terrorist attack in Australia where 3,000, over 3,000, maybe 4,000 Australians were killed, a bunch taken hostage, there's probably 1,000 taken hostage, would you also agree that we should just not retaliate?
Well, look, after 9/11, I was so angry. All I wanted to do was retaliate.
I'm talking about in Australia. You can't. That's in America. If that happened here,
after October the 7th, I was all up for I was so horrified by it. Okay, so it's hard in the heat of the emotion of the moment.
And however, when it's your people, yeah.
But we've got to try and work out what's the best thing for the future. Now, I think that is thinking soberly. Now Netanyahu could have got the Nobel Peace Prize. We could, if we didn't retaliate.
If he did it your way, if he just capitulated to terrorists,
we could have then had a really
terrorists. You're willing to capitulate to terrorists. That's why you're willing to march with them to conquer the harbour bridge.
Okay, so people didn't take that suggestion about not retaliating and having a serious peace deal, and here we are. We've got a destroyed Gaza. We've got Israel, very sadly on the nose. We've got an anti-Semitism problem erupting. So what's the better alternative? What's the better alternative?
You're assuming
the alternative was to not retaliate.
You were assuming in all of that. So one, Israel's had 2 objectives the whole time. One is to get rid of Hamas's power so that they can no longer commit atrocities that they've promised to do time and time again. That's the funny thing. Like you say, if Israel only de-escalated with a group that promised to recommit the same thing over again, this time though, when they did it again, but when they did it again,
peace is contagious, as Ronald Reagan showed us.
When they did it again, this time there would be no jailed. There would be no terrorists in Raman to swap them for, so they would just have free reign, like the kind of diplomacy of like a child. Like yes, we want to all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The problem is that there is a radical Islamic ideology that just doesn't play into your particular worldview. The question I ask you is: have you ever rallied for any other children in other conflicts besides for Israel and Gaza?
Look, I'm not a big public protester guy. I'm a sort of conservative.
How many children estimated to die in the Israel Hamas in Gaza? How many children so far around? Do you know?
Well, look, if you're saying
2025, is it?
Yeah, it'd be about that. Yeah.
2025. Let me ask you: how many Sudanese kids have died in the war there since 2023? Same year.
Look, I saw a figure the other day. About 260,000. I think yes. So look, that's a tragedy. Okay, now.
No. Why you rallied for the children. You rallied for the children. So you're wrong. You're still wrong. There's over 500,000 Sudanese kids dead in the same time.
This is whataboutism.
You rallied
This
for
is whataboutism.
20,000 kids. You cared so much that you joined Marxists and Islamists on the
Well, you keep
Sydney
saying
Harbour
that.
Bridge.
You keep saying that on social media. No, let me tell you. You've characterized.
But you don't care about the shit. Why have you never rallied for this? What about the Yemen? What about the Yemen? What about the Yemen? Yemen children, 400,000 dead since 2014. Okay. Why have you never rallied? Why have you not taken over the Sydney Harbour Bridge for the Sudanese or my Yemeni brothers? My culture. Why didn't you rally? Why didn't you guys ever hijack the Sydney Harbour Bridge for that?
Look, if somebody else, if the Sudanese want to go and organise a rally, they'll probably be there. That's just a warning in 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was thinking I thought Rukshan was just trying to calm things down.
You have repeatedly said you were not there, obviously, on the bridge on the weekend. You've repeatedly characterised us as, Al-Qaeda and communists. Now, I want to tell you, I think the viewers would be interested, what was my experience?
We all have eyes. We saw.
You saw, look, it was a massive event, and so people have cherry-picked it here and there.
You can see the top. You can see the flags at the top. There were no Aussie flags except the tiny little cute one that your streamer friend bought so you could wave it up here and pretend like it's are you kidding me? Are you guys Australia first? Is a libertarian New South Wales non-interventionalist going to a rally that's calling to sanction Israel with somebody calling to bomb Israel? Are you Australia first? Why would you rally with people that don't proudly wave the Australian flag? In fact, I challenged you the day before to take an Australian flag. Why didn't you?
Look, this is all garbage. This is
I want to have
an intellectual debate. I want to have an intellectual debate. You keep asking me questions. I try to answer, then I get, Avi, I'm sorry, I love you, but you're being rude. Let me answer.
Answer why you joined the Marxists and the Islamists.
No. This is the people I march with. Extremely nice Palestinian Christians. They don't believe in the river to the sea. They're just worried about half of their relatives being killed. Okay, I marched with Jewish Australians who were some of the most persuasive critics you get of radical Zionism. But most of the people there, about half of them, were Arabic Australians.
I heard you on the radio saying you marched with
very normal people. They look like very normal people. Okay, they look like tradies and shopkeepers and parents, and they're all talking Aussie.
Why no Aussie flags?
Very, very normal people. Okay, and the other half was sort of white people and other people, and they were motivated by, they weren't communists or Marxists or Al-Qaeda. They're just sort of people who really feel emotionally affected by the gruesome scenes that they are seeing.
So why did none of them have Aussie flags? Why did they all have Palestinian, or they were Marxists, or they were terrorist flags? They were holding placards of terrorists. Why were there no Aussie flags there?
Well, there were a few. Just you weren't there and you didn't see them.
What, the little one?
I don't know. This is a silly argument.
Okay. Let me ask you, what changed your mind?
Intellectual stuff.
What changed your mind? Okay, you did a complete 180. You've been a pro-Israel voice. That's why it was so shocking to people. People, like I said in the beginning, you were like a rational voice from the libertarian perspective. It seems from your social media that it probably has something to do with Tucker Carlson, because you're sharing a lot of his content, which is weird, because even he lately has been exposed as a fraud within the anti-Israel movement. But is he the one that's kind of driving that for you? Is that where you're getting most of your kind of information that's changed your mind?
Okay, well, you've asked me a question. I'll tell you. Okay, everyone I knew for all of my life has thought that I'm the most pro-Israeli person that they know. Okay.
No one's denying that.
Now, and that's why after October the 7th, no one spoke out of the New South Wales Parliament more than me. Now, then what happened? Okay, I'll tell you what happened. I went to Argentina. President Malay invited me. It's a very long flight to Argentina. Before I got on that flight, someone says, "Hey, John, you're interested in the Arab-Israeli conflict?" I said, "Yeah, I know all about it." And they said, "No, you should listen to this podcast. It goes for 30 hours. It's about the history of the conflict." And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Now, what happened to Avi? I found that that was by Martamaid, and it was the history of Zionism from the 1890s to 1948. And I didn't realise how little I knew. And it was...
What are your thoughts, by the way, Winston Churchill? Because if you're talking about Darren Cooper, what's your view on Winston Churchill? You used to be a massive fan of Winston Churchill. Are you still a fan of Winston Churchill?
Yes, let's not get off the subject. I think Winston Churchill is one of the greatest men of the 20th century. Yes.
Hold on, but the guy that's rewriting Israeli history.
Well, I don't endorse everything he says, and anyway, he's been misquoted. You haven't listened to his podcast. You've
I
read
don't
about
need to.
it.
I listened to his Tucker Carlson interview where he called Churchill the biggest villain of the Second World War. Are you kidding
Well, I
me?
don't agree.
Okay,
And he corrected it afterwards.
I definitely don't agree. But what I'm saying to you, this is the guy that Tucker Carlson introduced into the world.
You haven't listened to him.
The best historian in the world.
Is brilliant. His
So
podcast is brilliant.
if we support Winston Churchill as the greatest, and I agree with you, what were the total deaths from the Allied bombings in Germany?
Well, look, the whole of World War II gave us about 60 million deaths. I'm guessing about 2 million, maybe 3 million German civilians died. Yeah.
It was actually it's 500,000, but 500,000 killed in the bombings, I believe, and 400,000. So 80% of it were civilians. So how to you do those two things? Because I can understand how Darren Cooper makes the argument that Winston Churchill is the biggest villain, because he also says that Israel is the biggest villain for the numbers that don't even come.
Well, you haven't listened to his podcast. His podcast is extremely fair. He's very critical of the Palestinians.
I'm sure. I listened to him on Tucker Carlson, and I got enough out of him.
You should listen. No, you're just reading about what his critics say because they can't refute his arguments.
I watched his interview on Tucker Carlson, and I can hear you're picking and choosing, and all the nonsense you're saying about Israel and rewriting Israel's history is coming from this guy that called Winston Churchill the biggest villain.
No, I've got a good point here. Okay. I listened to this podcast. I found it quite chilling and extremely fascinating. Now, then afterwards, you know what I did? I searched the internet for critics of this podcast. Yep. I said, who's out there to say that this is wrong? And I can't find anything except that I find people slagging him off who haven't listened to the podcast, okay? And anyway, look, I mean...
Did you watch the Tucker Carlson Ted Cruz? Did you watch Tucker Carlson Ted Cruz?
I did, yes.
What did you think about that?
Look, I'd always had such a high opinion of Ted Cruz, but he's been completely brainwashed because he believes...
He's been brainwashed?
Well, he has. He admitted he learned it in Sunday school. He learned it in Sunday school that if you're good to Israel, then God will bless you.
Don't you find it odd?
That's not in the Bible.
Don't you find it odd that Tucker Carlson went super hard on Ted Cruz while he goes easy softballs to anyone that criticizes Israel, including Darren Cooper, who called Winston Churchill the biggest villain of World War II.
We're getting way off topic. That's called journalism. I'm not going to comment on his journalistic abilities. So,
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You did just comment that it was good, but then suddenly when we take it to Darren Cooper, you don't. By the way, how many? Because you did that video that you just mentioned a minute ago. How many Palestinians are there in Gaza? Do you know?
About 2 million, I understand.
The West Bank?
I think it's about 4, 5.
And no, it's closer to 3, but that's okay. The Albanese government saying that they want to bring that they've approved 3,000 visas. Would you support them bringing in more?
I support a 5-year immigration pause. I support a 5-year immigration pause. I don't want to bring people out here from a war zone.
But you care about the kids. What about the kids?
No, I don't want to bring people in from a war zone because they cause trouble.
I agree with you.
I want to end the war. I want to end the war over there.
I saw the video that you made with the Christians about Gaza. What was the point? What was the point of that video?
Well, a lot of people just sort of get brainwashed in Australia and they think that everyone in Gaza is Al-Qaeda or Hamas or whatever, okay? And they're not aware that there used to be a thriving Christian community in that part of the world. Now, there used to be a thriving Christian community all over the Middle East. There used to be a thriving Jewish community all over the Middle East. Now, I'm guessing that your ancestry is Yemeni. The Jews in Yemen lived there for 2,500 years. And they were reasonably happy. Wasn't perfect, okay?
Don't tell me about my family history. Listen, let me ask you.
Well, but then they got booted out.
Was that?
100 years ago, 20% of Baghdad was Jewish.
Yeah, I know.
Very happy people, doctors and merchants.
And they got chased out by the lovely people.
Yeah, well, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Okay, because the table was overthrown, wasn't it?
Okay, so let me ask you. So just quickly, the point of that video was to show that there's other peoples besides Hamas that live in Gaza, correct?
And she seemed like a very nice lady, yeah.
Okay.
And she's
How many
very
Christians
like,
are
I
there?
thought
How many
Australians would relate to her.
How many Christians are there in Gaza? Because it was kind of like a reframing that this is about a Christian Jew. How many Christians are there in Gaza? Do you know?
Look, I reckon 100 years ago it was probably about 20%. My guess today to be about 1 or 2%. That's what my guess
A
would
number.
be.
Give me a number. 1 or 2% of 2 million. What's 1 or 2%? I'm the only
20,000,
non-accountant.
30,000.
20,
I don't know
30,000.
why this is important. Yeah.
Because there's 600 to 800. That's so you jumped on a Christian. Do you know how many Jews there are in Israel?
I think the population of Israel is about sort of 10 million, of which are probably 8 million are Jewish.
Do you know how many Christians there are in Israel?
I don't, but I'm guessing it's probably about 3% of the population, which is a lot of people. Yeah.
So there's almost 200,000 Christians there now. So like when I watch your Christian video where you're trying to like reframe it as like this is like there's like it's somehow about a Christian thing where it clearly isn't, and you don't know even how many Christians are there, or you don't know how many Christians are in Israel.
You gave me a question off it, without me warning. I think I said
you said the Ted Cruz interview was good. You said the Ted Cruz interview was good. That's exactly what Tucker asked Ted Cruz about.
Yeah, well, I'm doing better than Ted Cruz.
I don't know about that. You don't know So you went and advocated. You went to the rally that was organized to sanction Israel.
Do you think I should have not given those people a platform? She seemed like a very nice lady. She was not anti-Israel.
No, but the reason,
she said stop the bombing. She said I support Israel. She said I don't want to rivet to the sea solution. Of course, that would be.
She didn't say she supports Israel, but anyways, but the point is you framed the conflict as.
Well, I didn't say that the majority. I just said that here's a voice you haven't heard of before.
No, you said that there's lots of minorities in Gaza, and it's not just these Muslim Palestinians that Israel is killing, but you're talking about 800 to 600. You want to know something else that's funny? In 2005, do you know how many Palestinian Christians were there when Hamas took over? I assume not, because...
No, I'm going to guess it was probably about sort of 5 to 10 times higher than it is now. I suspect a lot of them have been the refugees that countries like Australia have taken in. That's what I guess.
There was 5,000. And then 2 years after Hamas took over, so keep Israel out of this. This was in the early days when they just took over.
Yeah.
So then there was 3,000 in 2007. So the population
Hamas are the worst people on earth. Okay, so why is your mate Bibi? As we've gone through the quotes, I got more here for you.
Hold on.
Why did
how
your
many
mate
Christians
Bibi
were there?
so much?
How many Christians were there in Israel at the same time in 2005?
Well, I just told you. I said it's probably 10 or 20 times what it is now.
So in 2005 in Israel there was 150,000 almost. In 2005 in Gaza there was 5,000. So my point here being,
I think they're the refugees that have come to countries like Australia and Canada and America and
but
Germany.
they were escaping Hamas at the time, not Israel. They were escaping.
Yeah, because Hamas are monsters. You don't need to tell me that Hamas are monsters.
Yeah, I feel like I do. But my point is, you tried to reframe this thing as a Christian thing, where the only have you no shame that the only place in the Middle East, the only place in the Middle East Christians are safe. Christians have grown in population. Is Israel, the country that you tried to reframe, is targeting Christians somehow, when they're absolutely not. Israel is the only place saving Christians in the Middle East. Have you no shame to do that video with Syrian girl who calls for bombing Israel?
Look, I know that Israel, generally speaking, is a liberal democracy. Gay people are free to live their lives as they see fit. Ethnic minorities are generally looked after. I'm very well aware of that. My criticism, and that's great. So that's why Israel could be a beacon to the rest of the Middle East. And that's what I wanted to see happen. That's what I want to see happen. Now, that's not going to happen until we get this conflict behind us. And we can get this.
Let me just wait for that bell. I'm finding it hard. I'm just finding it hard.
I'll jump in for a second. So, guys, the bell is actually... You're in Parliament, are you, John?
It's just saying the dinner break has ended.
Yeah.
But I am... I don't have to go down.
Okay, yeah. So people who are wondering what the bell is, it's not me ringing the bell to stop these two from talking.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was at first.
Some people are asking me to moderate this, but I think, look, I wanted you guys to have a discussion about this. I think it's just more free-flowing. I know some people are annoyed about, questions not being finished off and answers not being finished, but What do you guys think? Do you prefer
Guys,
this to kind of be free
listen,
flowing?
if people feel like something wasn't answered or finished, throw it in a super chat.
Yeah.
Um,
We're going to get
and
to those
and,
questions after. So I'm going to
and
help
we'll get to it.
guys who are listening and watching this this debate, talking about the moderation. Look, put your comments and questions to either Avi or John into
Yeah, I'm happy
super
to answer
chat,
anything.
and then I'll answer them on your behalf. I'll moderate on your behalf after their discussion ends, and then that way we can see, any kind of issues that you've raised. We can put to both of these debaters here today.
God, that noise is so annoying. Did you have to put up with that?
It's
How
going
many
to finish
times a
very, very
day?
shortly. It's going to finish very, very shortly.
We'll just let it go down, but yeah,
Here we go.
I much prefer just the free flow of conversation.
Yeah. I'd rather have
I
the
think
free flow, and then at the end we can have questions. Oh. You got 7 more years of this?
Okay. Now, I do want questions, Rukshan, because I'm hoping it's going to be more intelligent. But
Okay.
I wanted to make this point.
I like how you don't call them intelligent. You can't answer.
No. It's silly little gotcha games and no intellect. Not interested in talking about history. This is a subject about history. But look, I want to finish my point. Israel is obviously a liberal democracy internally. Obviously, it is generally nice to ethnic minorities and cultural minorities, rainbow people and others. My criticism is on the foreign policy and the group within Israel that has an expansionist mindset. I'm pro the Israeli peacemakers, the moderate Zionists, and I hope they make a comeback. I suspect they will at the next national election, which I think is due in about 18 months. So yes, and then we can have Israel, as they've had peace with Egypt, they've had peace with Jordan, the Abraham Accords, the Saudis are all lined up to join them, the Gulf states have. So look, long term, we can achieve this. We can make the Middle East great again. It can absolutely boom. We have to have a serious peace deal. We have to really strive and compromise, and then Israel can be a liberal democratic beacon to the rest of the Middle East.
Okay. Do you accept that a large proportion of the rally that you went to are Marxists, are Islamists who hate everything that Australia stands for?
Complete slur. It's complete garbage. It's like what they said about when you and I protesting COVID. It's the same type of slur.
Is
and
it?
You've got nothing.
In the COVID protests, I remember a lot of Aussie flags.
What are we going to do? Questions.
There was a lot of
silly.
Aussie flags at the.
I'm not here for silly little games. Rukshan, weren't we going to do questions?
I get that you say that because you literally stood there, did a video framing the Christian thing with somebody that talks about genociding Israel.
By association won't work with me.
Guilt of participation, but we got into that. Anyways, your Ben Fordham interview, there was a couple of interesting things that I noted. You pointing out the Jews for Gaza that were there with you at the protest, as you wanted to, like, those are like, we like to call them in the community the chickens for KFC.
I think they're very brave.
Yeah, they're very brave. They have nothing to.
There's nothing in it for them. I think that's humanitarians.
Okay, let me ask you: have you heard of the Association of German National Jews? No. So because basically in history, there has, through history for Jews, there has always been, in this case, far left-wing Marxists, but in different times in history, people who sided with the enemy, trying to destroy our people. Who got
in? Well, some minority position is correct. Okay, so look, the Jewish community, I think there's about 20 million in the world. It's very, very diverse, okay?
It is.
Now, there is a minority there, okay? When Zionism first started, most of the Jews around the world were very anti-Zionism. They said, don't do this, it's going to embarrass us. That's what they were saying in the 1920s, okay? Sure. They said that is what happened. Now, yes, most Jews around the world today are pro-Zionism, and look, Israel's there. Israel's not going to. There's not going to be a river to the sea.
Why is most of the world pro-Zionist? I come from Yemen. In Yemen, they were anti-Zionist. Why did they become pro-Zionist?
Most of the Jews around the world are of course, supportive of Israel now. But I think a lot of them, particularly in the United States and other places, share my concerns about aggressive foreign policy. Now there are, and so some of the most persuasive people out there, intellectual people who have intellectual debates, unlike this one, sorry, Avi, some of the most persuasive critics of Israeli expansionist policy are Jewish people.
Okay. So yes, I agree with you. Some of the most elevated and amplified voice in this space
And we should listen to them. We should listen to everybody.
because they're your
Anyway.
token Jews. Let me ask you: the Jews that supported Hitler in the rise to think, did that make in the rise of Hitler in the 20s and did that make Hitler less anti-Semitic? Did that make Hitler more right just because some Jews jumped on his bandwagon?
Look, they must have been pretty obscure. I know my history pretty well. I've never heard of them. They obviously made a very fatal error.
Association of
Well, there was
German National Jews. You know what happened to them at the end?
Gang.
You know what happened to them at the end?
Stop doing all the talking. The Stern, you want to bring up Nazi collaboration, okay? You know that the Stern Gang, which evolved into the IDF, they were very pro-Hitler, and they wanted Britain to lose. They wanted Britain to lose the war, so that more Jews would come to Palestine. Now
there was a tiny radical group that was shunned by the entire Zionist movement. This is what I'm talking about when you rewrite history from Darren Cooper to delegitimize even the.
You don't even know his name. It's Darryl Cooper.
Let me ask you.
That's how well you know him.
What?
You don't know his name.
Darryl.
Darryl. That's that. So you've
got. He goes by Marty something.
Anyway, Rukshan, we're doing some questions here. This is silly. The viewers aren't learning anything here. We got some questions.
No, we are. We're learning that. We're learning that you went to a protest.
Oh, here we go.
That was
Look,
named, that the stated aim was.
Rukshan. Now this was a debate.
I'll throw to some questions. I'll throw to some questions.
Avi, you were not worthy of this intellectual debate.
Yeah, just because you're refusing to answer the questions that literally everyone in your comments, your own supporters were asking, just because you're refusing to answer that doesn't make it illegitimate questions. You just don't want to answer the tough questions. Answer the questions. They're not that hard. They're not that hard. How could you be an anti-interventionist and then go to a rally which its stated aim is interventionist with somebody who is an interventionist? And everything you're saying about everything you care about.
We dealt with this 20 minutes ago. Okay, so look, I don't want the Australian government to intervene. You know what? I don't want the American government to intervene. Okay, and that's a concern I have about the radical Zionists, is that they sort of have co-opted U.S. foreign policy under various presidents. Okay, and so I believe when what George Washington said in his farewell address, he said, look, please, we've got a good thing happening here in the United States. Let's not do foreign policy. Let's have peace and trade and goodwill with anyone. Let's not do foreign entanglements. Now, somehow, the George Washington principle has been abandoned. I want America to get back to that. I want Australia to get back to that. Rukshan, can we please have some questions?
Let me ask you, yesterday, the New South Wales Libertarians tweeted, I don't know, they basically referring to the caravan hoax. Yeah, you brought this up, yeah? You brought this up before. And they wrote, I quote, discredited fake anti-Semitic attack as part of a criminal con job and sustained lobbying from the Jewish Board of Deputies, where freedom of association was not only being attacked by specifically target to censor criticism of the Netanyahu government. Do you agree with that framing? Have you seen that post I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, David Adler told me that it was the Jewish Board of Deputies who were lobbying behind the scenes for the
Do you agree with the framing? Do you agree with the framing?
Well, you just read it out.
That's on the New South Wales. That's on your Libertarian post yesterday. Can I ask you who was actually responsible for that fake attack? Because the way that it's kind of framed, it looks like a
criminal con job. The federal police. Well, why are we talking about this? The federal police have confirmed it was a criminal con job. There was someone who was a Muslim. Okay, but he wasn't a devout. He wasn't a political activist. He's fled the country to Turkey, trying to negotiate a settlement. What the hell are we talking about that for?
Because you guys posting this, it's all part of this story it's all part of this narrative that you've suddenly done a complete 180 on. So it was Muslim criminals who were pro-Palestinian, who did use the current wave of Jew hatred for personal gain. That was the con job. You don't mention it. It's not mentioned anything. Okay, so do you not think that detail is important in a post from your party when talking about it, when framing it? Because when you frame it as a discredited, fake anti-Semitic attack, it gives the vibe off of like a Jesse Smollett moment where Jews did an attack on them, a fake attack That's the narrative that it gives. It gives
Well,
the
I don't think
impression.
the party's account tweet said anything like that. I mean, that's
I'm
garbage.
saying
No one
it
would
gives
say.
the impression when you write a
Why?
discredited fake anti-Semitic attack.
Well, look, I was on that committee. I was on the caravan. I'm still on it, still going. Okay. And the first question I asked the Deputy Police Commissioner, I said, look, there was an alarming rise in anti-Semitic attacks over the summer in Sydney. Fire bombings, graffiti, synagogue bombings. It was alarming. It was happening every 2 or 3 days. I said to the Deputy Police Commissioner, so the caravan was a criminal con job? He said yes. I said, how many of these other incidences were related to that same criminal con job? Someone trying to get himself out of jail, and he said 14. Now, that was a big relief. And ever since the caravan thing got exposed, there hasn't been any high-profile attack. So that was good. The whole thing was BS, and that's good.
No, I agree with you that it's BS. I'm talking about the framing here, where it
Well, what
isn't.
about free speech, Avi?
I
What
know,
do you
and
think about the various restrictions
I'm
we've got on-
100%. I'm 100% coming on
This
to that
was
now. I
framed to
agree
the
with you.
viewers
The
as
free
a
speech.
debate, not an interview. This has been an interview, not a debate. Okay, but I would like to ask you,
It's the
Avi.
same as Ted Cruz. You said the Ted Cruz.
No, that was an interview. That was an interview. This was a debate. Okay, now I thought
Yes, I
Rooksham was
agree
going to
with
be
you.
the
So
moderator.
you asked me.
Anyway,
You asked me
you
about
tell
the
me
free
about,
speech.
no. You tell me about what you think about the anti-free speech laws
That's
that
what
have
I'm
been
saying.
coming in. What do you think about it? Yes or no? I'll do you. Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you support the anti-free speech laws?
Absolutely not. I've always stood
Have you
against them.
campaigned against them?
Absolutely. And
So you're critical. So you're critical of the organisations that have been lobbying for them.
absolutely, always have been,
Great.
and all conservative Jewish organisations have been. You see,
Well, they're
but
not that noisy.
that is my problem with your framing of this, because you're taking the Jewish board of deputies that may have used this, but I don't even know. So when you say when in the post it says it's going to make it unlawful to criticize the Netanyahu government, that's completely made up. What were they pushing for in that?
Well, hang on. Now there is this international definition of the Holocaust, or anti-Semitism. Sorry, international definition of anti-Semitism.
None of that
which
is criticism of the
of Israel
Netanyahu government.
is anti-Semitism. Do you believe that? Do you believe that criticism?
You're a liar.
Well, hang on. I'm sorry. What
Tell
am I
me
about?
now which part of that legislation that was getting pushed by apparently the Jewish Board of and I believe that they support anti-hate speech laws, which I completely reject, and many Jews reject. Fine, but my question to you is, which part of that legislation is trying to outlaw criticism of the Netanyahu government, which you guys wrote in the framing, in which you set it up by saying first this fake anti-Semitic attack that then the Jews are using to push hate speech laws that stop you from being able to criticize the Netanyahu government. Show me the legislation. Put it up, but it's a lie. It's not true.
All around the world, including in Australia, there is hang on, Avi, you asked me a question, then you roll your eyes.
Show the legislation. You're in Parliament.
There is an international definition of anti-Semitism, and it's being we've got this and this commissioner or whatever she is for anti-Semitism, and it's happening in the United States and other countries, that criticism of Israel's foreign policy is anti-Semitism. Now, do you agree? Do you believe you can be a pro the Jewish people, a philo-Semitic person? Do you believe you can be that and a critic of Israel's expansionist policy?
So I reject the premise of the expansionist policy, but being anti-Israeli government policy is not anti-Semitic. Look at me.
Good.
During COVID, I was a massive critic of Bibi Netanyahu's policy. So
yes.
I absolutely agree. But I also would say that today a lot of people use the Israeli government, there's Zionism. It's all euphemism for Jews. A lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon.
Well, this was never the case before October the 7th. This was never the case before October the 7th.
So what?
No, well, because of the overreaction, the gross overreaction, that's what's caused it. That's what's caused it.
And you jumped on the bandwagon.
It's not Jew hatred. There's never been Jew hatred in Australia.
It's Jew hatred. When people use
you're saying that
as an excuse to attack Jews, by definition, it's Jew hate.
Me? You're saying that's me?
No, I'm saying you're jumping on the bandwagon of it, because I don't know why. I thought maybe by the end of this conversation I'd work out why you've jumped on the bandwagon, whether it was just Tucker, whether it was just you're trying to jump on the, you're trying to garner the.
It's very simple. I am appalled by the unbelievable mass suffering. That's it. Period.
Yeah, but you seem to
And I
not
want it to
be
come to
appalled
an
by
end.
any other mass suffering that's way worse around the world.
No,
When you
I'm appalled
advocate
by
for the Swiss model of non-intervention regarding Israel Hamas, what do you mean? The Swiss model, you
Well,
say?
I think that the Switzerland hasn't been involved in a war for 500 years, and it's served them very, very well. Okay, no, you had World War One swirling around them, the Cold War, World War Two. Everyone leaves Switzerland alone because Switzerland's not aggressive, and Switzerland's very prosperous and happy. Okay, healthy people. Now, and I believe that, and the, that's what Australia's foreign policy should be. That's what America's foreign policy should be. Then the world would be a lot happier place. We've got these things called nuclear weapons, right? Which are, it's not like the wars in the old past. We can have a nutter get a hold of nukes, and then we can have serious mass death. If America and Russia go to have a nuclear war, we're all back in the Stone Age. I love the world. I love our future. I think we're going great. War's really, really dangerous to all that we've achieved. So I'm always on the side of trying to de-escalate conflict.
What has their policy been in this war? Do you know?
Who's that? Sorry.
The Swiss.
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing that they have. I don't know. I'm guessing that they haven't sent money or troops or bombs or anything else.
No,
So
but the Swiss government shifted from October 7. They shifted from neutrality to explicit condemnation for the first time. They formally designated Hamas as a terrorist group, banned any travel, anything to do with the organization. So they actually took, for the first time, a pretty hardline stance. So it's interesting that you invoke the Swiss when even the Swiss are not actually with you on this.
Well, I don't think they're sending money or bombs or armaments, so that's called non-intervention. Now, it's like, I mean, I'm not calling on the Australian government to intervene. I don't want us to take sides, okay? I don't want the government to take sides. Now, the citizens are free to speak up about various causes for whatever they want, but we don't want the government to use its power to intervene because all it does is create blowback and makes people hate us, okay? And then it means that people in Australia, if the government is going to take a side on foreign policy, it means that some people are going to lobby the government, say, well, I want you to fight for my little cause on the world stage, or no, I want you to fight for my cause, and it causes dissension. So yes,
I agree. That's why you probably shouldn't take over the harbour bridge with Marxists and Islamists who refuse to fly Australian flags. Let me ask you, the Greater Israel Project, I've heard you mention it. You're talking about Israel being an expansionist state. What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, look, I mean, I believe that Abraham was a historical figure, lived 4,000 years ago. Now, we meet him in very early on in the Bible, in Genesis 11 or 12, and God says to Abraham, I'll give you this land. Well, he says, you'll have as many descendants as there are pieces of sand on the beach and stars in the sky. And he says, you'll be a great blessing to the world. And you know what? That's true. It makes me sort of think the Bible might be right. Every year we have the Nobel Prize winners, okay? And around Christmas time. And who wins the physics and the chemistry and the medicine and all the really mega brainy stuff? 25% of them every year Jewish, okay? And that's great. And these are people who've just been sitting in the lab for 50 years, super duper brainy people. You never heard of them before. They've made some breakthrough, which I'm sure is very impressive, very important for the world. And they're not, they don't want to be a celebrity. They win the Nobel Prize. So often it's Jewish. So I believe that, yes, it makes me think that maybe God is up there. Maybe God's spirit is in the Bible, because I look at this very ancient book. Now, God says to Abraham at that time, your descendants are going to own the land from the Nile to the Euphrates. Now, obviously, when they gave back the Sinai, okay, because they used to have it to the Nile, obviously in 1979, when the moderate Zionists were in control, they did do a fantastic peace deal. So now, but I think that there are elements probably to the right of Netanyahu who say, no, we believe in the river to the river. I know it's about a 5 to 10% really radical faction, but you've heard them say that. They want to go from the Euphrates to the Nile. Now, Netanyahu, I don't think Netanyahu...
I don't think I've heard anyone... So you're saying that they'll take West Bank, Gaza, parts of Jordan...
I just said 5 to 10% of the most radical ones do. I'm not...
Lebanon,
that's
Syria...
What Israel is.
So it's not a real... it's no real policy within in the Likud party, for example. It's a ridiculous radical idea that I've never heard before, except when it comes to Israel.
You've heard it
bring it
before.
up. I've heard it from Israel. I've heard it from people like you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's multiple parties to the right of Netanyahu, and I'm pretty
That
sure that some.
that talk about the Greater Israel Project, where they're going to take Lebanon, where they're going to take Syria, where they're going to take parts of Egypt and even Iraq. You're telling me that there are parties in Israel that have that policy? You're just making stuff up. There's no one that has that policy.
Well, there's elements there. Look, they're fringe. They're a fringe
How
element.
is Israel? How is Israel expansionist when it literally the whole thing of peace has always been land for peace? In fact, Gaza itself was made in a deal, land for peace. My family was dragged out of there so that we could have peace. How do you really believe that argument when you make it?
Can I have a minute to answer without interruption, please? You've asked me an important question.
No, go for it.
So in 1967, the Six-Day War, the Israelis took over the West Bank, okay? And then within a couple of months, that was a very quick war, obviously.
From who? It's important. From who?
The Jordanians.
Oh, so it wasn't the Palestinians, okay.
Okay, well.
It was occupied by the Jordanians.
They're basically the same people, aren't they? Now, then what happened within about a month of that war, we started having settlers going into the West Bank.
Yep.
Now, I'll ask you a question. You've tried to trip me up tonight. I think I'm doing pretty well. In the year 2000, how many settlers, which every American president has said is illegal, and every Israeli prime minister said, oh, yeah, we won't do it anymore, Okay, but they keep doing it. So in the West Bank, which every peace deal basically says, the Palestinians are going to get, the lion's share of the West Bank, okay? In the year 2000, how many Israeli settlers, were in the West Bank?
I don't know. But let me ask you, do you believe in the idea of conquest? If somebody starts a war, hold on, but if you live in Australia, how is Australia today? If you win a war,
I haven't finished. You said you're going to give me a minute. You said you
asked me a question. I just thought it was a silly question. The premise of the question is ridiculous.
No, because you're trying to deflect because you're embarrassed because you don't know a very basic fact. In the year 2000, not that long ago, there was 250,000 settlers in the West Bank.
Yeah.
And today there's double that. Okay. And just in May, they had the biggest expansion in West Bank settlements. No one's hearing about that.
What happens when you win a war, John? What happens when you win a war?
The West Bank hasn't been in the war. It's been Gaza.
No. In 1967, Israel won in the war where Jordan and all those other Arab nations promised to wipe Israel off the map. Israel won the war and took the West Bank
and they
back.
Took the Sinai, and then
what
they
happens
gave it back
when you win a war?
the Sinai back through a peace deal.
Okay.
And they keep talking about giving back the West Bank.
Historically, when you win a war, what happens? Skip it to something. When you historically win a war, what do you get to do?
There's negative consequences for losing a war.
What are the benefits to the winner, John Ruddick?
Well,
unless you're going the
well, you just said to me, well, who's expanding? You just said openly, yeah, we want to expand because we won the war.
No, that was in 1967. I'm talking about since 1967, it's been peace, land for peace, including in Gaza. And the people that have rejected that have been the Palestinians, because the Jordanians accepted it, the Egyptians accepted it. Both of them have peace. So the idea, we live in Australia where unless you're arguing this is Aboriginal land like the rest of the people that you marched with on the bridge, always was, always will be. If you believe this is Australia, well, really, it was done, I guess, through conquest. And that's just the way of the world. You lose the war, you lose the land. And I think that there have been a lot of mistakes made historically, and I don't think everything Israel does is right. But after this whole conversation, I can't for the life of me really understand from a policy, from any substantial way why you've done a 180 on this, besides for that you just feel
in this rant you've had about 4 subjects in this rant, okay? 4 totally Aborigines,
how many members have you lost? How many members have you lost from the Libertarian Party from this?
Probably less than 1%. Now, look, that's sad. That's happened. Okay, we've gained supporters as well.
I'm sure the Nazis would love it now.
Look, Avi. When I decided a week ago to go on this march, I had a feeling that it may cost me politically. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I don't go, or maybe I do go. And I thought, well, what a coward I will be if I am genuinely horrified by what the humanitarian crisis, okay, that it is escalating, I thought before I got elected to Parliament, I thought the most gutless people in the world are politicians who won't stand on principle because they're fearful about getting re-elected.
You're not
And I
standing on
thought, no,
principle.
look,
There's
I
no
do feel
principle.
very,
You've never stood up for kids in your life.
I do feel very upset about this issue. And so I thought, you know what,
Right.
I want to make a stand and play some role in hopefully trying to bring about peace talks and de-escalation.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah. So,
have we got questions, Rukshan? We're going around in
yeah,
circles.
let's go to questions in.
Up?
Let's go to questions in 2 seconds. I just want to
All right.
ask you: is it true that you're? Is it true because people sent me things saying that your chief of staff got kicked out of the Nats? Is that true?
Well, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Why was he kicked out? Because I found
I don't-
reports saying that he's self-described
Look,
as
made-
a fascist.
Well, David Adler, when I employed him, look, he was a young guy 10 years ago, 12 years ago. He made bad mistakes. I invited him to work for me because he's a very popular, very, very intelligent staffer. And I rang David Adler. He told me, look, this guy, he voted Labor at the last election. He voted for The Voice. Okay. He's very popular. He's one of the most respected staffers in this building. Now, when he wanted to work for me, he said, John, I've got to tell you, when I was a kid, I made some bad mistakes. I said, okay, cool. What was it? He showed me it. And these mistakes were bad mistakes. And he said, John, David Adler from the Australian Jewish Association will vouch for me. I said, well, you better be right, because there's no way on God's earth I'm giving you a job if he doesn't. I rang David Adler, and David Adler said, I vouch for him. And if you get asked about it from the media, I will stand up for him. And that happened.
I guess I better ask David Adler. Does he run the Libertarian Socials, or is that somebody else?
No, he's a parliamentary staff. He's got nothing to do with the party. He gets sacked. He's not allowed to do anything politically. He does parliamentary stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
He doesn't do any campaigning or anything. He's not a libertarian. He's a professional staffer.
Okay. All right. Do you want to go through some questions there, Rukshan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sum up some of the questions. A lot of them are actually statements, and I don't think we should take the statements in that sense. But some of the people are asking. I can probably put this to both of you. You know, John, earlier you were saying that this anti-Semitism that we're seeing in Australia is a fairly new thing, a new phenomenon.
Yes.
How do you explain what happened? I guess the day or so after October 7th, on the steps of the Opera House, and some of those scenes that we witnessed, where people were. Now it's been contested what was exactly said, whether it was "where's the Jews" or "gas the Jews." Some of these type of comments that we've seen, and just to add to that as well, a lot of these protests that we're seeing in Australia. I just want to bring it back to Australia because there has been issues around social cohesion in our society. A lot of even the one on the Harbour Bridge, it's about a march for humanity, for instance. Would humanity include the release of hostages? A lot of these protests that we've seen for almost years now in Australia don't really touch on the hostages in that way. It's very one-sided. Now, and that's their right, of course. So how do you square all of this?
Look, that protest on the weekend could have been twice as successful as it was if they made it a joint campaign against the hostages. And if the Jewish, I've been to.
What's that?
Let me just wait there, gentlemen. That bell is telling me I'm meant to vote, but it may not be. It's either not important or my vote's not critical. But if it's not either of them, I'll have to be back in 5 minutes.
So, yeah, that's right. Go check.
No stress. So, guys, if you're watching and you're wondering what's going on, John's actually a member of the New South Wales State Parliament.
Flip it to 2 screens.
Yeah, I'll flip to 2 screens. He's actually in Parliament at the moment. So when they hear the bells, it means that they're required for a decision on the floor or whatever it is, right? And that's why those bells are ringing. And John is just going to go see if he's required to go out into the chamber and take part in it. So we'll see if he comes back. I can read some of the super chats, which are statements while we're waiting. So I'll just catch up on some of the super chats, Avi, while we're waiting, and I'll get back to that question when John comes back. So Shalom, Avi, to your guest. What were you hoping to achieve with your march? As an Australian-born Jew, the march showed how unwelcomed we are. It didn't end the war, and no word on the hostages. Shame on you. So I think John gave Hugh's side on that. I don't think we don't have to put that to him. Someone saying, Avi, stay classy. I think the comments during the stream, Avi, people have mixed opinions on whether you're being classy or not. So you can watch that
I
back
tried
later.
to be more chill, but
Look,
it
I
just
mean,
frustrates.
there was many points where I wanted to jump in and moderate or stop. People were asking for this, but John Ruddick is someone who's a bit more of an intellectual than the guest that we had last time, and he can hold his own in terms of
Yeah.
conversing with you. And I think I preferred to watch the conversation, and it was mixed views. Some people preferred to watch the conversation. Some people wanted to put questions to each of you. But I think whatever you guys were
I'm
doing in
happy.
that discussion,
We're happy to take questions. I just think that
yeah,
the point of the point of this whole debate for me was that to get into. Oh, there we go.
there
He's
we
here
go.
now.
No, I was
The
gonna say,
Doing
like,
purpose of
questions.
the debate was to have a discussion about how
no,
to
no, but
solve the
John,
problem, what
this is
the
the
cause
thing.
of the problem
No,
is.
John, this is the thing, right? So, like, I know both of you.
Avi spent 2 days trying to get out. Oh, he
Look,
said that.
both.
He said that. His social media
But
account
what
said that. Okay.
I'll
Just
be
trying
honest.
to.
I'll be honest, John.
There's no honest faith. There's no good faith to try
Yeah.
and solve the problem.
But I think what people want to know, John, I think from what I've seen online of the sentiments on X, where people are discussing you, right? Last couple of days, let's be honest here, a lot of people are discussing you, and former members and leaders and all these kind of things have had to make comments because of your change in stance and your public statements. So I think it was important, perhaps, that was raised as a question, because that really comes to the crux of, for people that have known you for a long time, and you are someone that a lot of people listen to or look up to, for instance, in the libertarian movement and in the the conservative or right leaning movements. So I think that was valid of Avi to put those questions to you. I don't think any of these debates will really answer a lot of the questions around
Well,
the
that's all
world.
I'm interested in.
Yeah,
Hey, can you hear me okay, or should we wait till these bells are finished?
we can keep going, but back to the question I was asking you before that a lot of the people in the
Yeah.
comments are asking. You say this anti-Semitism is a new thing. Do you think it just allowed people to be what the way that they really want to express themselves today? Like that's what we're seeing more and more of. Like when I watch the march on the bridge. Yep.
Look, on that event that was at the Opera House 2 or 3 days after the October the 7th, and before Israel's done a thing, before Israel has had any retaliation, you have about 500 to 1,000 people who are bad people, okay, who I would hope should not be in the country. And it's a failure of our immigration because clearly these are people who are Israel haters and they were almost enjoying the fact that there was going to be a war. I was the person that told the parliament the day after that. I got up and gave a speech. I said, you know what happened out the front of the Opera House last night? They said this. And the parliament went, they was like, there was shock, okay? So I'm the one that first brought it to public attention. David Adler gave me the video.
That was back when you were pro-Israel, but you know where those guys all were on Sunday?
I'm more pro-Israel than
Do you know where
Avi.
that guy? You know where they all were on Sunday? They were all on the Harbour Bridge marching with you. That's where they all were.
Well, things have okay. I'm Israel's bigger friend than you, Avi.
Okay.
The radical Zionists make
friends
Israel
like
look
you,
bad.
who needs enemies? Yeah, I gotcha.
No. Rukshan, what happened was there was a large number, okay, but in terms of percentage, a very small percentage. In the whole 5 million people in Sydney, the word got around, and how many turned up? I think it was 500, might have been 1,000. Very bad people, okay, and they were that, So and I was the one that publicised them, okay. So, and the worst part about them is that they did it before Israel did anything, okay. So now, but your question, you preface it by saying, well, John, you say there's hasn't been an anti-Semitism problem in Australia. There hasn't been an anti-Semitism problem. Now, we've let in some silly migrants and bad migrants.
About it, but there has been. There clearly has been. If you go to,
well, they've never shown up in the polling. They've never shown up. Fraser Anning, I know, I'm not calling him a Nazi or an anti-Semite, okay,
yeah,
but
because Islamic communities weren't going to vote for Fraser Anning,
but do you think now? Sorry, Avi. Do you think now? I'll put this question to both of you. Do you think now, as it is today in Australia today, that the die is cast now, and there's almost no going back from this? Because from top leadership down, some might even say, because of your actions, for instance, John, there's people in the comments saying this, that the die is cast now, and Australia is set down this path where this has now become acceptable when it comes to blaming Jews for all sorts of things. The Jews that live in this country now, as someone who's not a Jew or whatever all this kind of stuff is, I see it firsthand that a lot of people, especially online on social media, blame Jews in Australia specifically for almost everything that's happening around the world. Like almost anything they blame them. Like, do you think that's a problem
including
going forward?
the New South Wales libertarians on Twitter?
Okay, do you think that can be addressed, John? Do you think that's something that can be addressed, or the die is cast now?
it is really alarming, okay, and it is emerging as a problem. Now, I'll tell you what I think has been an error, a strategic error from Avi and his friends, and that is they say if you criticise Israel's foreign policy, then you must be an anti-Semite, and
No,
that has been
you're
the
making
general
that up.
message.
Show me one example where I did that, mate. Show
Not
me
Avi,
one example.
not
You're
Avi. Okay,
lying.
I
Don't
withdraw
say
that.
Avi and his friends. No, mate. Don't say
I,
Avi and his friends.
well,
I've never done that. I've
you don't want
never
me to
done
make
that.
the point. Okay, okay. Actually, you know what? I apologise to Avi because he's a good guy and he wouldn't have said that. But many people, other people, have said if you criticise Israel, you're an anti-Semite. Now that was a strategic error because there's a lot of young kids out there. Let's say young kids who don't know much about politics. They have compassion. They see the TikTok videos. They
Mm.
see bad things happening, and they say, "Well, look, I'm really against this." And then they keep getting told, "Well, look, if you're against
Well, what?
Israel, you're an anti-Semite." Okay, and they've conflated it, and that's really, really dangerous for Israel.
So are you
People,
denying that there is anti-Semitism when you make that argument? See, I don't get
no,
that
it's growing.
argument.
It's growing. It's
It's
growing
growing.
because
Okay, so that's the problem.
it's being conflated. Now it's still talking about
Hold
a
on. So
tiny
you're saying
percentage of people.
at first you said it happened. It's growing because of what Israel's doing. So
Yeah.
it's the government in Israel is the reason why Jews here are being targeted. How come wars within the Middle East when it's Muslims, it hasn't caused the Islamic community as a whole to be blamed for whatever, like to the extent that we're seeing here today? Why didn't you give that justification before? Because there have been many more Muslims killing um, non-Muslims and Muslims than Jews have in this war.
Well,
Why is it?
I'll put that into question then, Avi. Do you think there's a different standard, John? This is what I see anyway. Do you think there's a different standard for Israelis and for Jews when it comes to this type of foreign conflict from Westerners? Do you think that as a Westerner, someone that lives in a country like Australia, do you think the standard is different? Because I do see, like, what you guys were discussing before, the conflict in Syria and stuff. People in Australia don't really get
Okay.
up in arms about it.
John
Conflicts in
never went to
Africa.
rally for the Sudanese.
Not stop, Ivan. Conflicts in Africa, people don't really in Australia don't really care. Conflicts in Asia, there was a civil war in Sri Lanka, for instance. People in Australia didn't really care. They didn't really get up in arms about it. What is specifically is it about Israel and Jews that gets people in the West up in arms to this extent, where it becomes really a major issue in the country? Like so many people are at odds in terms of their relationships. It's almost similar to COVID times. Like if depending on what position you take, people are up against each other. It could be family, it could be friends. I notice it a lot within conservative circles because obviously it's beyond all these kind of ideological boundaries and things that we set. So why does it happen specifically against Jews when they're involved in, let's say, defending themselves or fighting a war, or what do you think that is?
Well, look, as somebody who is a very serious admirer my whole life of the Jewish contribution to humanity and Jewish people, it is heartbreaking, and you are describing it accurately, Rukshan, and you're right, there is a lot of other conflicts out there. There's less and less conflicts in the world these days, which is a good thing. Okay, but you're right, there is a preoccupation with this. Now, so Avi mentioned it before. I read it. There's a famine going on in Sudan, which is not far away from Israel. Okay, but so why is there this preoccupation? Well, it's not just in Australia; it's around the whole world. Okay, you could go to Bulgaria or Botswana. Okay, this will be like front page story of the Botswana news. Now, I think it's because look, we're dealing with a very sort of ancient situation. Okay, I mean and it's in such the three biggest religions in the world, or most significant religions, are sort of focused there, and it's known as the Holy Land. There's an enormous amount of history, and it's just sort of it just happens to be a big deal that a lot of people have strong opinions on and like talking about. So
Why? He's asking
No,
why.
no. So
I
I'll
don't
just
have the answer.
I'll
I don't
rephrase
have the
that.
answer.
I'll rephrase that then, John, just to kind of make it easier. Do you think then the demographics of Australia, which have considerably changed in the last 2 decades, we do have a more bigger Muslim population, a growing Muslim population. Do you think that plays into kind of the activities that we're seeing in terms of these protests becoming a large movement, for instance, on the Harbour Bridge? I don't really think that would have happened 30, 40 years ago in Australia when it comes to this issue, but the demographic shift. So do you think that is then, pushing foreign policy as it relates to this, Australia's foreign policy, the way that the Labor government is behaving, and also on the ground, how people are being engaged in the conversations around this conflict, because of course they'd have Muslim friends, they'd have Muslim co-workers. Again, I'm not saying it's anything bad. It's Muslim Australians, and they have every right to protest. And like you said, the majority of the protest was most definitely likely people who were worried about the scenes that they're seeing overseas. I accept that. But do you think they actually have a sway in terms of the demographics? And, I think going forward, as these populations increase, we are going to be, polarized to such an extent on Middle Eastern issues because of this demographic. Do you think that's a possibility of what's happening right now?
Look, I look at what's happening in Western Europe now with their demographics, and I'm horrified by it. Okay, and this is why I support a 5-year immigration pause. And part of it, and that's it's not to kick out Muslims, it's not to kick out black people, it's to kick out. I don't want anyone coming in. It might even hurt our economy a little bit, but it can look at Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe's got social stability, and that's what we very, very much want. Now, I want to have a policy of after a 5-year pause, we might go for a 10-year pause. But after that, I mean, look, Australia is still a small population with a whole continent to ourselves. But if we're smart about our immigration, I would think we need to prioritise people who, are going to really valuably contribute to the country. And a criteria would be they don't bring their wars from their homeland to this country.
I agree. This is where we agree. But, prior to I've seen this 180 that you've done, I think much of our politics, we did see eye to eye. That's why it's so shocking. This is why it's shocked so many people, because it's not me that's changed. It's not the facts that have really changed. You couldn't even you say it's genocide, but you couldn't even define genocide. So it was you that did this 180, and the question is why? Why is this sudden 180?
Through this half a dozen times. I
No.
to get
So
questions
it's
from
fine. We don't have
Rukshad.
to go. We don't have to go back.
This is silly.
I'm not going back on it. What I'm saying
questions.
is, you're on one hand you're denying that there
Well,
is
I've tried to answer it, and I don't get an
No.
opportunity to answer it. So.
It's fine, but you're saying that there's no anti-Semitism.
I enjoyed the question from Rukshan, if that's okay, because look, it's just I don't
You
think
don't
you're
like
acting
you
in
don't
good
like the
faith,
question.
Avi.
Did you know what?
No, I
Everyone
don't, because
came here
it-
tonight to find out why you went there to march. You want to
I've
talk
tried to
about
tell
all this
you.
other stuff. People want to know why you went there to march, why you've shifted your thing, why you've joined the mob, why you're going opposite to everything you've ever claimed. And the problem is, your
Look, I probably just
explanation for that
reflect
makes no sense.
I probably just reflect Middle Australia. There used to be polls in the days
Sure.
after October the 7th
Sure.
that America, about 65% of Australians were fully behind the
You're
retaliation.
not a leader. You're a follower.
Now it's
I
down
got
to
it.
Well,
14%.
I'll just jump in again.
14%.
So
And
just
it's all my
based
fault.
on
It's all my
John,
fault.
based on some of the super chats,
Maybe there's something else going on.
even
You're
one
a
of the questions.
follower, not a leader. That's what
Sorry,
you've
Avi.
shown.
Sorry,
Well,
Avi. Sorry, guys. I'll stop you both. Even one of the questions that I had, John, and I know you're a, I guess, avid follower of Donald J. Trump and MAGA and American politics, and you follow it very closely. So Donald Trump today was asked this by a reporter: is there a genocide happening in Israel, in Gaza? Sorry, and he came on and said, no, it's a war. In those type of terms, do you think Donald Trump is wrong? Do you think he's lying to the public? What do you think is going on with the Trump administration? Because the U.S., they find countries like Australia, France, the UK, Canada, in terms of their intervention by recognizing the state of Palestine, or talking about doing that, as being an obstacle to removing Hamas from that region. Now, we've had Saudi countries in that area, or in the Middle East, Qatar, I think Saudi Arabia, and a few other nations who have asked for Hamas to step down, demilitarize, and leave. So do you think, you're at odds with the US position on this? Do you think you're at odds with Donald Trump, or do you think, he's wrong as well on his position?
Like I will always love Avi, I will always love Donald Trump. Now, one of the things that I most liked about Donald Trump was that when he was first campaigning for president, he was very clear that he wanted to sort of take a non-interventionist foreign policy, particularly with Russia. And this is why the deep state hated his guts. Now, and one of the best things, the two very good things Trump did in his first term was he defanged the North Korean psychopath, rang him up, said, let's have a cup of tea in Singapore. And that was good. That was good. Now, the poor old North Koreans are still suffering, which I feel very sorry for. But at least we're not going to have Tokyo nuked now. Okay, so thank you, Donald Trump, for doing that. No other foreign president, US president did that. And the other very, very, very good thing that Donald Trump did in his first term on foreign policy was a little thing called the Abraham Accords, which were just magnificent. This is why I liked Trump. Now, what's happened now is, and I still like Trump, but yes, I am critical because he has given a blank check to Netanyahu and the expansion of Zionists. And an example of that is last week, Canada comes out and says, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. And then Trump responds, okay, and he says, well, that's going to stuff up our trade negotiations between the US and Canada. Now, what the hell? I'm mystified. What the hell has Canada's relationship with this dreadful conflict got to do with trade policy between the US and Canada? It's very, very odd.
So what are you implying when you say that then? So what do you think is driving?
Well, it is odd. It is odd. And I say it's odd, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know why he has given Netanyahu a blank check, which he has done. I don't approve of that.
Trump also he campaigned on peace through strength. You don't think the way that Trump has handled most of this conflict has been exactly that?
I think it's been a tragedy for American foreign policy to have just got engulfed in the Middle East. And I think that it's bad for America's reputation and it produces blowback.
Do you think that what he did with Iran, the 12-day war, do you think that was peace through strength? Do you think that was a good idea?
Look, I'm 50-50 on that one. That hitting the nuclear sites was probably a good thing. It was a surgical strike. I don't think many people died, so it seemed to have brought that conflict to an end. He did tell Netanyahu to pull his head in and stop bombing Iran, and he used the.
Was that your favourite moment in the war?
Well, it was, because it brought the bloody thing to an end. Now you don't. I mean, look, the Persians and the Jews have throughout history been the best of mates.
Why did all your libertarian friends get that all so wrong? Why did Tucker Carlson get that so wrong? Why did Dave Smith? Why did all those guys get that so wrong? So they said if Trump got involved, were you following all that? Did you?
Yes, I was. You're right.
Were you on their bandwagon? Like, did you agree with them that this is the worst
as you know, Avi, as you know, I'm on Twitter a lot. You can see my comments at the time. I was basically sitting back and just hoping this thing doesn't escalate. Iran turned out to be more powerful than we thought, but but look, if they don't have a nuclear bomb, look, I give the Israelis a free pass on the silly Iranian ayatollahs who are going out there and saying, we're going to send Israel we're going to wipe them off the map, and then at the same time they're building a nuclear bomb. Now, if you're the Jewish people, after there'd been the Holocaust and about 6 other Inquisition, and the Romans were very nasty to them, the Egyptians were nasty to them, the Babylonians were very nasty to them, the Russians were nasty to them. So when you have a theocratic, crazy regime like the Iranians, and they're talking about wiping Israel off the map, and they're building a nuclear bomb program, I say to myself, well, if Israel goes and hits you, ayatollahs, you really are asking for it. And I think it is in probably Israel's national interest to take out those nuclear bombs. Now, they've dug them deep down into the ground, and so there's a good case that Trump did the right thing, because only America had the capacity to do it. And you're right, Avi, you're right. Dave Smith, who I like a lot, Tucker Carlson, who I like a lot, they did say, if Trump gets involved, it's going to escalate and escalate and escalate. They were wrong. Trump got involved, and it was the end of it. Thank you, Donald Trump.
A question
did you get it wrong? Did you get it wrong, or you didn't?
Well, I didn't say that. Look, you can go through the tweets.
No, I'm not. I'm literally just asking if you. The reason why I'm asking is
I don't think I commented on it. I was following it really, really closely, and I was really worried about it.
The reason why I'm asking that is more to show, obviously Trump knows a lot more than you and I know. Besides all the history that can be rewritten by Darren or Darryl Cooper, whatever his bloody name is. But the facts on the ground at the moment, the ones that Trump is saying today, is not a genocide, is a war. He has a lot more information than any of us here have. He had a lot more information than obviously Tucker or Dave Smith had there. He got condemned by a big chunk of, that new woke right that's emerged. And he went against him. He didn't care, as Trump does. He does what he wanted to do. And they implied many of the similar things that you said about Canada. Oh, he's just being controlled by the Jews. He's just being controlled by... It's odd. It's odd that he's doing this for Israel.
Well, it is odd. It is odd.
And then it turned out that the tactic he used was the most successful of all. It was a 12-day nothing war. Now, when it comes to Trump and Canada, Trump, within his crazy negotiation ways, says the most outrageous stuff. Have you not noticed that over the first 4 years, but especially in this administration, where if somebody doesn't do what he wants, he threatens something, and whether or not that actually pans out, it's like, wait for his actions and not his words. Do you not see that? Do you not?
You might be right. Look. A lot of my default position is to think that it's a bit chaotic with Trump. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's playing 4D chess better than I can.
No. I'm not saying he's playing 4D chess. So in fact, I'm saying sometimes he might just say things off the cuff that doesn't actually mean really anything. It's just a way of him saying he disapproves of Canada going against.
Good point. No, that's a good point.
I don't know. I just think like jumping to the conclusion that maybe it's the Jew.
I'll ask both of you a question. Just something that's come up in the comments a few times now. I'll put it to you as well, Avi, first. So, do you think, this is what people want to know, do you think obviously 1,500 or so hostages were taken, and that amount of lives, close to perhaps was lost on October?
There's 250 hostages.
Yep, 250 hostages, sorry, but in terms of the total loss of life,
yeah,
was around 1,200, 1,300, that figure. Do you think that death toll justifies death of 60 to 70,000, whatever the number is today, of Palestinians in Gaza? That's what people want to know from your perspective as someone who's very supportive of what Israel is doing in terms of defending itself.
It's a fair question, and the thing of proportionality, I think you got to look at the rules of engagement, the laws of war. But the thing is, you don't judge it by the death toll, because if you did that through history, well, often the winners of many wars will then have that, and that's why I was referring to World War II, because in World War II that's literally how it ended. So it's not who's killed more people. Proportionality doesn't work like that. The point of this war from the beginning, and I'm not even saying that Israel being in there now is a good idea. I'm not even arguing that. I don't even know, to be honest. I want this war to be over more than anyone. But there are two objectives that were clearly stated from the beginning, and that is release the hostages, and Hamas lays down their arms. They no longer govern. They can no longer govern the Gaza Strip. Now, there's two ways of reaching that objective. That is, keep fighting until that happens, or Hamas literally does those two things, lays down their arms and gives up the hostages. You cannot, there is no other choice. What should Israel do besides for that? They can't do anything else. So the loss of life, when it comes to civilian life, is tragic. No matter who it is absolutely horrific. But the obsession of the world and the double standard of the world on Israel, on this conflict, and I know John wasn't he wasn't naming, and he's giving us reasons as to why he thinks so much, because it's the center of the world of the three religions. It's not. It's rubbish. It's the reason why so much of the world cares about this is closer to what you were arguing, but on a broader international scale. So it didn't matter what Israel would do in return, just like we saw on October 9. It's the fact that there's 2 billion Muslims around the world. The vast majority of them, by default, are anti-Israel. You have the far left, who by default are anti-Israel because they've got a worldview of oppressed and oppressor, and everything goes through that lens. And now this new emergence of the woke right, which also have an oppressed and oppressor kind of worldview, just their oppressed is the white man, and the oppressor is always somehow the Jews. And in this situation, it works perfectly. So you just have the mob. And that's what you saw pan out on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was the mob from all those different groups that joined together. Yes, there are many people that just join the mob. They're sheep. And to make the argument that they are somehow like the COVID protesters, no. The COVID protesters at the time went against everything, went against the government, went against the public popular narrative. They went against the police, the state, the media. They went against everyone. The people that jumped on the bridge today, on Sunday, they just went against the Min's government.
Well, I know a lot of people that wanted to be there. They said, look, if I go there and I have my photo taken, I'll lose my job. So there was, there is pressure for. So it's not like a walk in the park. People had courage to be there in many
Show me
cases.
one person that lost their job
John,
for being at
do you
that
think
rally.
these protests that we're seeing in Sydney, for instance, enable Hamas to continue down this path? Because they've rejected multiple attempts at ceasefires, and this is a propaganda win. So the Sydney Harbour Bridge is not often used for protests like this.
I don't think it
And I
ever
know
was.
people have said it's been used before, but
Oh, has it?
you know, there is a representation of the Harbour Bridge as an icon of Australia. So if you are able to, your movement, whatever it is, capture that bridge in a way, and there were statements made by organizers, you know, this is our bridge now, and they do say that this is a symbol of all of Australia now supporting this cause. Do you think this type of protest movement symbology enables Hamas to not negotiate in good faith when it comes to a ceasefire? And I'm being completely honest here.
The longer the walk,
they are the weaker party, and they have refused to engage in ceasefires with the US and Israel in terms of, you know, ceasing their activities and moving on from that region. So don't you think that this just enables more of this to continue on? Or are you asking for Israel to be the bigger person in this instance, for instance, which is, I'm kind of summarizing what you may have been saying, and to just, you know, accept Hamas's terms. Now, recently they've asked for Jerusalem and a whole swathe of that area, and, you know, then they give back the hostages. Do you think it's wise for the West to negotiate with a death cult terrorist regime that sees no value in the lives of their own people?
No, there's no way in the world that anyone's going to ever negotiate with Hamas. There was one election in the Gaza Strip. Hamas did win it when they were radical and they were definitely pro, river to the sea. But they've shut down elections ever since. If they were really popular, they would have had multiple elections to keep renewing their authority. Now, so the more this war drags on, the worse it is for everybody. Okay,
but who do they negotiate now with to end it? I don't understand that point.
Well, look, in the West Bank, there is more moderate leadership. Okay, and there has
the
been
people
now
that pay for slay.
Yeah, well, look, it's not perfect. I know that, okay, but I mean that's a start. Look, I mean, there's a book called about negotiation called Getting to Yes. You've got to have small concessions.
But they have no power in Gaza. So how would negotiating with them make any difference?
Well, look, I mean, people talk about a two-state solution. Look, I probably think the ideal is probably, a three-state solution. Israel, West Bank, Gaza. I think you're probably right.
Who do you negotiate with in Gaza? Because this is your solution. You're the one that is marching for it.
Yeah.
So.
Well. Okay. Well, look, if I was the dictator of the world, what I would say is I would say that go back to what I said should have happened 2 years ago. Look, I suspect there's probably 2-3 dozen poor Israeli hostages right now. I think about them every day. You may not believe me. I do. I know it's unbelievably terrible. Now then you've got 3,500 Palestinians, and you know what, Avi? I bet you're right. I bet they're in those Israeli jails for doing bad things. I'm sure, and the Israeli hostages are completely innocent people. I'm very well aware of that. We've got to make some compromises. So what I would say is, okay, you can have back
with
all
who,
your.
Though?
Well. I just said, what if I was the dictator of the world? This is what we'd do, right? We would switch them back, okay, and then we would then there should be a Netanyahu should should regret pumping up Hamas, and then
he regrets it. You got him. You caught him out. You regret it. But you're saying not to negotiate with Hamas. That's what you just said to Rukshan. But you haven't given us an example of a situation where Hamas.
We should have an election. We should have an election in Gaza. Okay.
Are you going to run the election? Why do you think there's not been an election for 18 years?
There should be. Well, the first thing we need to do, we can't have an election while people are starving and cannot access hospitals. We've got to sort of flood the place with, proper.
Yeah. John, I just want to ask you about the starving. Sorry to cut in. I just want to clarify this whole starving thing as well. Do you think Hamas has a role to play in the starvation of the people there? Because there is a lot of credible information of Hamas actually taking these stockpiles.
No question. I agree with those reports.
Yeah.
We know they're monsters, and this is why Bibi made a dreadful strategic error in pumping them up.
So just so I clarify, your solution is not to negotiate with Hamas to give them back all the people on remand for terrorist, the 3,000 people or whatever who are currently awaiting trial for terrorist acts, give them back to Gaza, withdraw, they'll give the hostages back, and somehow you believe that the group that's been there for 18 years and hasn't run an election are going to be like, okay, I agree to an election now. That's what you...
Well, I would think that what would happen is that there would be, look, we could get the UN involved, okay, or something.
Oh, they've been
but
really great.
We can't have an
They're
election
such a
for 6
success
months.
in the Middle East.
Look, we cannot have
Are
an
you
election for
naive
6
or
months.
stupid? This doesn't make any sense. None of that makes sense. That's not a solution. That's not like a serious solution. That is like
what's your solution?
a complete...
What's your solution, Avi? Okay, I think the first step would be to prove to Gaza that Israel can have a permanent peace with the West Bank. That's quite doable. Okay, just like it is with Jordan and with Egypt. It's the best hope we've got.
Okay, so hold on. So what's your new solution?
A deal with the West Bank.
How do they prove peace with the West Bank? So give me that scenario, because now you're changing it. How do they prove to Gaza that they can have peace with the West Bank?
Well, as you know, Avi, they came very close in late 2000. They came very close. It's disputed. Okay, but
Daryl Cooper, he disputes.
Okay. Look. Okay. Now, then they've come close on 4 or 5 occasions with the West Bank, a permanent peace deal. They have, as you know, Avi, they've done it.
Okay.
Now I say persist until it's done, and there'll have to be compromises on both sides. They keep wanting to.
Okay. So now your solution
persist.
is to create peace in the West Bank to show Gaza that it's possible, and then
That's
what?
Right. Well, then we would also need to get a serious amount of humanitarian aid into. That's the first step in Gaza. They don't want an election now, and then we would have to, with time, when the starving has ended and the hospital facilities are in place and the schools are in place and bridges are built and people have got homes, they can get on their feet.
How are you going to build all that with Hamas?
Well, there's a ton of money. There's a ton of money in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, and I'm sure that they'll want to help their mates. They don't want to give it to
Hamas because Hamas spends it all on tunnels. So how are you? I'm serious. I'm seriously trying to understand your solution. So far, in the beginning,
I think where there's a will, there's a way. The Saudi, these people, there's a lot of money there in the Middle East, a lot of that oil money. They can get the place on its feet for 6 to 12 months.
You haven't thought it through. None of this you thought through. You're coming at it from a completely lefty, woke left, emotional position where
people are saying, Avi, what's your solution?
To love each other.
Avi, what's your solution? I think a lot of people are asking what your solution is.
You know what? The point that I'm making the whole time is that the two things that have to happen, that has been the mission the entire time, is release the hostages and Hamas lays down its arms. That can be done today. But you're not campaigning for Hamas to lay down their arms and give over the hostages. If they did that today, then that's it. The war's over. No more Palestinians have to suffer. No more Israelis have to suffer. And then they can rebuild Gaza into a beautiful place, and all the Arab world can get involved. In fact, this is the first time since October 7, last week, the Arab League actually condemned October 7 for the first time, while the rest of the Western world is talking about recognizing Palestine. The Arab League, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the one that was funneling to Hamas, Egypt, all recognized and said that Hamas needs to lay down its arms. So why are the people that you rallied with on the weekend aren't calling for Hamas to lay down their arms and release the hostages so it can end?
Well, look, it was very encouraging about the Arab League, okay? And what this tells us is that the long-term trajectory is towards peace, sure. Okay? And so this...
through strength. That actually happened through strength.
Okay, so I'm hopeful that we can get to that point. Now, look, I'm a humble little crossbencher in the New South Wales Upper House, okay? So I haven't thought through the logistics. But I know where there's a will, there's a way. When there's a will, there's a way. In the 1980s, the early 1980s, there was a hell of a lot of fear of nuclear war between the Soviet Union and America, okay? And then Reagan came along and he said, look, I'm going to try and become friends with this guy. And no one knew how that was going to unfold, but Reagan and Gorbachev became friends, and then they had one meeting after another, more confidence, and these things take time, okay? But I think that that's the journey that we have to get on.
I am fully supportive of that journey. But what I'm saying to you, for the war to end right now, it like without the fantasy of something that hasn't been achievable for 75 years or even longer, if you're talking about from the 20s when this really started to boil up. So for 100 years hasn't been possible. You want that to happen? You want the war to end now? The most realistic way to end the war now, and I think all the other things you're talking about is good. Like I think there has to be negotiation, and I freaking pray and wish that there is a partner for future peace. I would love to be able to go into Gaza where where there's a prosperous Arab state. I would love to do that. But for it to end today, the only way that that could end is if the hostages are back and Hamas is no longer in power, and that can literally happen now. But the problem is that they're basically looking at the useful idiots around the world, and that group has grown immensely, including on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, of people that are calling for everything but Hamas to lay down their arms and to release the hostages. And now you finally fall into that category.
Well, look, it's a good point. I wish all these these protests around the world that are critical of expansion of Zionism, they should make it a dual attack. Yes, they should be attacking Hamas and calling for the release of the hostages. Now, obviously, I don't organise these protests, Avi. Okay, so look, Hamas. I think what Hamas is doing is just sort of for their own extremely selfish reasons. I suspect there's not that much of Hamas left, but they'll still be the guys with the guns in Gaza, and guns give you power. That they will just sort of, they obviously hate the people in the West Bank more than anybody. Okay, they're absolute mongrels and bastards. Okay, and this is why we need to recognise why they're there in the first place, which is a big part of it was Mr. Netanyahu pumping them up.
No,
Okay,
you keep repeating that line. No matter how much you repeat it, doesn't make it true. The fact is, Hamas was voted in 2005. The fact that Netanyahu
and
government
they were radical then, and they've become like 10 times more radical. Okay, but
not
they
necessarily.
were always,
Their charter was always genocidal. Their charter always.
You're right. You're right.
So
Their charter was always that, and Netanyahu knew that, and that's why he said, "Let's support these guys because then we'll never have to do a two-state solution." That's the truth.
I just think you keep repeating that, and you don't actually
provide. Well, it's a very important point. It's a very important point.
It's not, but it's just not true. It's important to suit your narrative for your 180 shift. Suddenly, that has always been the case. How do you suddenly fit that into your stories to explain like your shift? Anyway.
Well, we can go through some of
my trajectory. Hang on, Avi. My trajectory is probably quite similar to Piers Morgan. Okay, now, Piers Morgan spent the first year.
You're proud of that.
Spent the first year being extremely supportive of the Netanyahu, offensive, and as time has gone on, as the images have gone on of too much suffering, he has changed. And it's not that complicated. There's no ulterior motives here. We're not doing it for money or votes. We're doing it because the suffering is
Piers
too
Morgan
much.
is absolutely audience captured. Piers Morgan shifted, makes all the same. I do agree. You are like Piers Morgan. I don't think that's a flex. That's all.
Well, I think get to some of the super chats, guys. If you guys are up for it, we can get through some of the super chats.
Let's start to wrap it up, I think. But anyway, one or two more. Yeah.
Let's do some questions. Well, I'll put this question to you, John. I don't know if this person is actually a member of the Libertarians. They're just saying this is what they said. They said, "That's right, John. Show us precisely who you are. What a train wreck today. I was sent a missive asking me to reconsider my resignation from the Libertarians. Thank you for cementing my decision by." Just on that kind of political aspect of it. Now you're saying you took a principled stance beyond politics, and that's what compelled you to go there because of what you felt in terms of marching for humanity. Do you think there is political pressure on you now, perhaps to change your views back, or is what your members are saying, doesn't really matter to you, or some of your members anyway?
Look, a lot of people have taken an interest in the Libertarian Party in recent years, and a lot of them have the view that the Libertarian Party is the Liberal Party, but with purity, okay, that we're exactly the same as the Liberal Party, like on economic reform and free speech and other things, but they're weak, and that the Libertarian Party really believes it. And people think that because it is largely correct. However, And that's why probably a lot of people have joined us. But there is a really, really big difference between us and the Liberal Party, and that is that we are a party that is very sceptical of war. We're not pacifists, but we think that in most cases wars can be avoided through the Reagan-Gorbachev model of trying to de-escalate, and because we're anti-government to start with, we think that war is like the pinnacle of all the bad things that the state can do. So I suspect that yes, there's been maybe a dozen or two resignations. Okay, we've got a few thousand members, and I suspect that this will be people who didn't really understand that the Libertarian Party, unlike the Liberal Party, if there's a war out there, the Liberal Party is the first to sign up to it, first to be aggressive with their foreign policy. Well, the Libertarian Party is simply a different party in that respect. We're very different. We are.
So why do you associate so much with the Syrian girl and Aussie Cossack, who are very much interventionalists, pro-war, just always on the wrong side of the wars? Why do you, the optics of that, how does that fit with your worldview of being non-interventionist?
Well, let's take those two. I met Syrian girl for a few minutes on the Harbour Bridge. I didn't even know who she was at the time. Okay, so when you say I associate with her, I don't know what you're talking about. Secondly, now with Aussie Cossack,
like you're very friendly.
with Aussie Cossack, who I'm sure is listening, who I do like him a lot, and I feel very sorry for his current predicament. Now, I was him and I. Look, I am critical of NATO expansion that helped contribute to this dreadful war in Ukraine. Now, Aussie Cossack, as I got to know him better, he wasn't critical of NATO expansion. He was basically a Russian neoconservative. He was all up for taking all of Ukraine. And I thought, okay, well, look, we're both critical of, but look, so we don't agree on foreign policy at all with Aussie Cossack. I feel indebted to him, like I feel indebted to you two guys, but particularly Aussie Cossack because he was in Sydney, unlike Melbourne. Aussie Cossack did do a very good job in mobilising and organising the anti-COVID rallies, which were one of the proudest moments of my life. So and he gave me a platform at those things. So I like him as a friend. We don't have much in common politically these days.
Look, I apologise. I did not know that you and Syrian Girl hadn't met. It looked like you were cozy. You did that video. I accept that because that's what's so shocking to me and to many people online, because she's quite a well-known person for a lot of her really horrific tweets and hateful and literally genocidal things she's said, not just about just Jews, even different minorities in the Middle East that don't fit her pro-Assadist Iranian, anyone that goes against the Hezbollah, like anyone that goes against the axis of evil, she has wished much death upon him. So it was surprising to me.
Well, I'll tell you how well I knew her. When I realised that this is the Syrian girl, okay, I assumed she was a Christian, a Syrian Christian. She says, no, I'm actually a Muslim. I didn't know, a Sunni Muslim. I didn't know that. So that's how well I know her, Avi. But anyway,
speaking of Syrian girl, we do have a super chat from her. So she's paying for a super chat. So let's just bring a super chat. If you'll indulge us, John, just for a moment, we'll bring up Syrian girl's super chat. It's about you, Avi. Avi Yemeni has stepkids who are Muslim. He loves Islamic immigration out of Israel.
I'm very proud of my stepkids. I love them to death, and it just proves one thing, that I actually have no problem with people for who they are. Unfortunately, what we've seen in Australia in the last 2 years has been a rise in anti-Semitism. People who just hate me for existing, and no, it's not because of what Benjamin Netanyahu did. Has prosecuted this war, because as Rukshan rightly pointed out on October 9, there was 500 already there, ready mobilized. And so 500 were readily mobilized. And I've lived in this country as a Jew for many years. I've lived in my skin. I've been around, Western Sydney. I used to work in Parramatta. I used to door knock in Bankstown. I know what they used to say about me before. In fact, they thought I was one of them. And also in Melbourne, I've been on chat groups for years. I know that anti-Semitism has been just below the surface for a very, very long time. People hate us. People want us to die. And now those groups have capitalized, firstly, by aligning the unholy alliance with the woke left. And now jumped on board is this woke right, which is sad to see John Ruddick join.
Let me just stump in with another question. We should be worried about Australia and not any other country. What do you think, John, about a lot of this kind of, even this protest
Well, I
movement,
think
right? Like, I just want to get this in the pro-Palestinian protest movement. A lot of the leadership, for instance, in that movement, are very much on the thought of Australia always was, always will be Aboriginal land. They deny the sovereignty of Australia, the existence of this nation. Nasha Majni, the leader of APAN and one of the most prominent pro-Palestinian activists who hangs out with Senator Penny Wong and so on. There was a flag burnt in Melbourne. I don't know if you know this Australian flag was burnt, and he was asked about this, and he said, "Well, it's just a piece of silk." But at the same time, this group wants Australians to be involved in this foreign conflict on their side. How do you reconcile that? And do you think Australians should distance themselves from foreign conflicts, or is this just the new normal?
Well, the Australian government certainly should. Okay, we should be non-interventionist. We should have trade and investment and tourism and goodwill with as many countries as possible, including North Korea. The sanctions on North Korea haven't helped. There's 26 million people in a near concentration-like camp conditions for 70 years, and it's a terrible situation. But the policy of having sanctions on it hasn't helped. And with Iran, I would say let's not have sanctions, because I say, look, if we have trade and commerce, over time there'll be a more liberal middle class will emerge, and that can only be a good thing. Now, in terms of whether Australian citizens should be concerned about the world, well, look, yes, intelligent people should be concerned about the world. They should have an interest in the world. We're all the brotherhood of man, okay? So we should be interested. But now, a lot of people will be interested in their rugby league or their AFL predominantly, or their car or whatever, and they're free to do that as well. But I mean, people who listen to the opposition podcast who've got a higher IQ than most, yes, we're going to take, if there's an election in Argentina, we're going to take an interest in that. There was a little war last week between
Vietnam,
Cambodia and Thailand. Okay. I was walking through Martin Place, Hyde Park. There was a big rally there of all these Cambodian flags. I had no idea what was going on. Okay, so look, it's people can take an interest. I think people should take an interest, but of course they don't have to. But I don't. The government should be strictly non-interventionist, like America was for its first about 130 years.
Do you think you attending a protest like that actually helps as the leader of the Libertarian Party?
What helps the
cause?
It
helps at all, either with in any way, because you're saying you as the leader who is saying you're a non-interventionalist, or the party is non-interventionalist. What kind of signal do you think it sends, even if you have shifted your position on it 180? What kind of signal do you think it sends as a politician, as the leader of the party, to join an interventionalist or a protest about a protest, not even forget about the fact that they are interventionist, a protest that's been happening weekly about a foreign conflict?
Well, look, the libertarian movement around the world is about 90% of the leadership, it's a very intellectual, ideological movement. I'd say 90% of the biggest names are critical of expansionist Zionism at the moment, okay? And so this is very much in line. Well, I'm not following them. I happen to agree with them. Now, my favourite person in the world, my favourite political leader in history is Avi Yemeni. He's very pro-Israel, okay? So there is diversity, okay? Now, it's not like the Argentinian government is sending them money or anything. They don't have any. But I mean, you talk about Rand Paul, okay, Dave Smith, your favourite.
You here as the leader here for a party.
Well, I think I'm
to
in
have
tune.
A certain stance. Don't you think it sends the message that you guys are interventionalists? You do care about the foreign. You're not just nobody. You're the leader of the party.
Well, we when we say interventionist, we don't want to use state power to intervene through money or through selling aid, okay, money or aid now, or bullets, guns, okay. But we are entitled to have opinions on all sorts of world conflicts, okay. But the paramount for everything for libertarian is non-intervention of the state. Now, individuals, and look, we believe if you're an Australian and you want to go and fight for the IDF, or you want to go and fight for the Palestinians, we don't believe the government should stop you doing that. If you want to go and fight for Cambodia if you feel like it, we'd suggest you don't. But if you want to as an Australian citizen, we would say, well, you've got the freedom to do that. we've got the freedom to do that. Okay.
Yep.
One more question, gentlemen. I better go.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll wrap it up in terms of you both of you. If you want, Avi, you can ask one more question of John Ruddick and John
No,
Ruddick,
he's sick of my questions. They're too good.
John, do you have any questions for Avi or myself before we wrap it up? Because I'm going to read the super
Well,
chats.
why don't you
There's
two
about 90
gentlemen
of
in
them.
Sydney next? Why don't you two
Yeah.
gentlemen in Sydney next? We could turn the cameras off, have a few beers, and really get this thing sorted out and solve the problems, all the problems of the Middle East.
That sounds like an idea. Look, I know like this thing is debate and such, but I don't think anyone believes theoretically or any way that a debate happening in Australia between three of us or you and Avi is going to change
No,
anything
but
that's
that
happening
wasn't
in
the
the Middle
point.
East.
That's
No,
why to me, like,
yeah.
that's why to me, John, the fact that you wanted to talk, I wanted to talk, and I thought it was clear by my posting of it that we were going to talk about the Libertarian Party policy, the idea of going there, why the sudden shift, those issues, not necessarily about the history of the thing. If we wanted to watch that,
well, we should have spoken, Avi, because I thought we were going to be talking about the history of the thing, because that's what it's
why
all
would
about.
you and I talk about the history of the war, a foreign conflict, rather than your involvement?
I think if we look at the history, we can come up with a solution. I don't want to just talk about the politics. I want to talk about solutions.
But that's the thing that everyone was asking: why the hell you went and why you've backflipped. That's it.
Okay. Well, I hope that some people have got some idea after
I appreciate you joining us, and again, like I said in the beginning, I do appreciate you facing up. You may not have liked the way I did it. It's weird, the fact I thought that was clear, that was going to be the thing, but that's fine. I accept it. I appreciate that you came in and you spoke to me. And Babette, you're welcome next.
Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you for hosting, Rukshan. Thank you for having me, Avi. Hopefully see you in person soon.
Thanks, mate.
Inshallah. That was for the Syrian girl. All right, let's read
We'll read the super chats, guys. So I know there's a lot there, and I didn't want John to actually sit here while we go through all of these as well.
No.
He's
there
actually given a lot of his time. There's a lot. There's about 70 or so super chats, but a lot of them are comments, so we'll just read them. Just because people obviously participated in this, and a lot of them were comments. So let's go through.
Did I get too angry this time, like with Chris? I think a couple.
No, but anyone watching and you saw me and Avi, debate Chris Coveries. This was more of a proper discussion between two adults.
It was just like, why was he so triggered by the fact that I was literally asking him the questions that people were coming in for?
I will say that John did not bring up a transcript midway while we're talking to him. So respect to you, John. Respect to John Ruddick for not bringing up the transcript midway while we're talking. I mean, that's how you talk to a normal human being.
100%.
When you're having a discussion.
100%, and I give him respect for not being a total ass like that streamer. But what I'm saying is, like, I don't know why he thought we were going to talk about the history of the war, that he's going to basically regurgitate
a lot of people even in the comments people are looking for a debate about particular history of the war, but I think
they were in the comments.
Not in the comments, they're asking for it, but there's no resolution to that. If there was a resolution to that, there wouldn't be this conflict. So
what's the point? What's the point of me and John Ruddick talking about the history of the
conflict?
But
because of the comments that I've seen on X, because of the comments I've seen on X, and what people in his own party and other leaders and so forth in the past have asked, I thought it was important, the questions that you asked him about his decision to attend that, and his flip, and people heard his answers. They might agree or not, but I think he did go some way to answering them on today's show.
He did. He got annoyed.
He answered them. He answered them, definitely.
He tried to jump away from him a lot, but he got annoyed that I was even asking him when they're not gotcha questions. It's like, you literally did a 180. You're in the Libertarian Party. A lot of people supported you because you were, exactly how I described him. And then you join this protest that goes against everything you say, plus the protest itself. And it like, why is that bad to ask?
Yeah.
And then he said it was just because he didn't think it was going to be like an interview debate. But I think all my posts online is me saying I'm going to hammer him. Like, I'm going to challenge him about all that stuff.
But look, I still think he was a good sport about it all. Let's get to the super chats.
No.
So we've got here from many faces. Why does Avi claim to be against Muslim immigration, yet he lives with his Muslim Lebanese stepchildren? I think you answered that before.
You know why? You know why? Because I live with my Muslim stepchildren. I know.
Yeah,
I
I
need to
don't know why
stop
that's
them.
like a.
They
I
give
don't
me
know what.
hard enough time. I don't need more of them. Does that answer your question?
I mean, we live in Australia. It's a pretty diverse place. There's people
It's just
in
such
all
a dumb
types of
argument. I'm not.
relationships.
It just the point is that
Yeah.
there's risk factors, and we see the demographic change, and there is a problem. And I've noticed that for a long time. It doesn't mean so that the fact that my stepchildren are Muslim just proves that it's not about me hating Muslim. It's about what we saw on the Harbour Bridge. There is something dangerous. We are getting conquered.
Yeah. Next super chat from Lisa. What country provides aid to their enemies and gives them a call beforehand? I mean, that was a question perhaps to John. I think he would have answered that by saying that it's not very common for that to happen, almost unheard of. But that is the expectation that is placed on Israel.
And you know what? That was in my line. That was